Good afternoon, everybody. A very happy Wednesday afternoon to everybody out there who's listening. Welcome to this episode of Creemee Cast. I have a very special guest here today, Alison Despathy. Alison, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back.
Glad to bring you in here again. So many great things have happened since the last time we have talked. Man, I said it to John Rogers when I was in there in his office interviewing him, the lieutenant governor in his office. I can't believe I'm sitting here with you right now. And to be honest with you, Alison, I can't believe I'm sitting here with you right now here at the 802 studio in Barrie, where we have this like amazing setup with all this fresh technology. Last time you were with me, we were in my cold auto shop, if you will, over in Northfield. So even we've had some big changes, but man, thank you so much for doing this today. I appreciate it a lot.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. It's so good to be here. And just to see this new space, it's awesome. And so much has gone on and there's so much to talk about. And you and I can always go in 50 million directions. So we got a lot of ground to cover.
Yes, yes we do. So folks, first and foremost, I just want to say once again, shout out to the 802 Scoop Studio for hosting us here in downtown Barrie. It's an excellent location. You should look them up. You can host a meeting here. You can host club meetings. You can host a party, that kind of stuff. It's a great space. And they do a lot of podcasts out of this space too. So if you're somebody who wants to do your own podcast, you have something you want to talk about, an idea to share, be sure to check out 802 Scoop Studio. You can check them out on their Facebook page. Also just want to shout out Guy Page, Vermont Daily Chronicle. Of course, this is an episode of VDC TV Creemee Cast. And Alison has been on a couple times, or maybe just once so far.
Just the one time,
Just one time.
Yep.
And we had a pretty interesting conversation that day. And I remember specifically we talked a lot about some of the environmental stuff. And I think this was at a period where John Rogers at that point had hosted a handful of rallies in the State House. And I think we were just after that when you came on. And I remember a lot of the conversations that we were talking about had a lot to do with like solar panels and the negative externalities of just, quote, renewable energy. And man, throughout the summer, did those ideas take off? And I'm just curious to know, because I know you were involved campaigning, you were helping with at least one candidate that I know of, and I'm sure more. But what was your summer like? What was your campaign season like? I want to hear a little about that.
Yeah, so I think it was such an amazing effort by so many people to see what happened in Vermont, as we're all well aware, to see the representatives that came in from the Republican Party, the senators that came in. We have much more balance. I think the biggest thing was really breaking that supermajority, and not in any sort of way that, not to make people feel bad, but we need the conversation. That was the only thing that was going to encourage that conversation and make that happen, and that's obviously what is now happening. And you can see it. Obviously, we're in the State House there regularly right now, and you can just see it. Like, people have got to talk. Like, we have these problems, we've got to talk, we've got to figure it out. We can't just go this one trajectory without people on board and asking the questions. And this summer, with regards to the campaign, I had a rough summer because my son ended up getting sick. My mom has cancer, so I had some rough health things that came up within my family. But within the Northeast Kingdom, we were really working hard to support the Republican candidates so we could get that balance back. And we were really successful. It was amazing. We flipped a lot of seats from Democrat to Republican, which is exactly what we needed for the conversation. So that worked.
No, and I can't say that walking away from our conversation back in the spring, even to conversations that we've had subsequently since then, that we are ever feeling this confident about the political situation in our state, and really just like the cultural situation. Because that bottom line, I think what we're witnessing, not just in Vermont, but at a national level and arguably globally, is this just a giant global shift in terms of political perspectives and the way that people are thinking about things. I think a lot of the times people in that building, the State House, they would love to think that they know how you and I are going to be pinned on a certain subject, right? That we're considered, right wing. But I mean, as we've discussed 1,000 times, what does that even mean anymore?
Right.
I think a lot of people would love to be able to pin me or you or anybody like us, Guy Page for that matter, where they would love to say they know where we're going to stand on a specific issue,
right.
But they really don't, because I can look at the Trump administration with clear head and clear mind and say, actually, I have some problems with a lot of the stuff that you guys are pushing out. I can look at Elon Musk and some of his work and some of these people that he surrounded himself with and say, yeah, I'm not sure I'm in love with everybody that's there.
Right.
One big one is Robert Kennedy Jr., who I do support. Glad he's there. I hope to God that he gets confirmed today.
Absolutely.
Confirmed today. But I definitely think, there's a lot of people that would love for things to be black and white, but they aren't so black and white. And you and time again have proven that to me and reminded me, by the way, hey, what about this person and this thing? So one of the things specifically that you and I have talked about recently is this rollout of a $500 billion investment into an AI network in the United States. I don't really know what that means, to be downright honest with you. I use AI. I use ChatGPT every once in a while. It's a very useful tool, writing tool. It's like my own personal assistant.
Right.
I use Opus editing clips, so cut and paste, or not cut and paste, but cut my clips up and do certain things. Very useful, saves a lot of time. But that's basically my limit of understanding of it. I don't even know what I'm communicating with, to be quite honest. I'm not really sure. So talk to me a little about that. What's this? What is this? What is going on?
AI, obviously, as we all know, is just taken off. It's like a whole other level that some of us, as you're saying, don't even understand. I think what was really shocking for me was, I will be honest, around the RFK piece. As soon as he pulled in Nicole Shanahan,
Yes.
and I saw that she was an AI lawyer, and right after Kennedy came in, and they had a tweet or a post, and it said, if we just have the data. So I think what I want to first come back to is, right now it is all about data, as all of us know. We are data commodities. That's how we're seen. Nature is a data commodity, and right now it is all about how can we get the data in every which way, through healthcare, through education, through AI, searching the net, doing what it's doing. So I think that that's something that we have to keep in mind. But what was shocking for me was when I saw Trump up there and looking at who he was surrounded by, Larry Ellison from Oracle, OpenAI, obviously Elon Musk, and so it's obviously it's a race right now. It is such a brutal race, and so many people say, well, China is winning and America's losing, and so then you look at this big investment. So Larry Ellison is up there, and he comes up and he says, we're going to put $500 million, in with the administration to be the leader of AI, and so I think it brings up questions of, again, you go back to the oligarchy. I mean, of course, we want to see, America thrive and do well, but this level of investment, this private-public partnership. So then you go back to that stakeholder capitalism concern. So a little bit after Larry Ellison was up there talking about mRNA vaccines and talking about the $500 billion investment, and we're going to go through electronic health records so we can figure this out. As soon as that happened, a few days later, you have Trump talking to the World Economic Forum, and he's saying, come do business here. We're going to give you tax breaks. If not, we're going to impose tariffs. So again, we're seeing, in my opinion, the government, and I don't often talk nationally because I'm really focused locally on the state level, because I feel like that's where we can exact our change. That's where really we can have the influence. But I'm just looking at this piece, and we're seeing stakeholder capitalism. And that was the Klaus Schwab World Economic Forum rollout of public-private partnerships. So now you've got these big companies investing into our government because we have to be the leader on AI. And what does that mean for us? So
you mean specifically, when you say, what does that mean for us? You mean specifically like me and you.
I mean,
not just the country, the nation. We can talk about things in broad senses, right? But this affects the individual. And that's why I think it's so important just to mention this, because yes, we'd love to stay focused on local issues here in Vermont. Everybody always makes that point. Everybody wants to talk about all this other stuff. Well, the reality is all this other stuff directly affects the individual in ways that most people don't even understand. Including myself, which is why I'm...
Well, I think all of us are trying to figure this out, like this whole other level of AI. And then you look at, just to add into this conversation, we've got J.D. Vance, right? And I think everybody knows at this point that he's essentially funded by Peter Thiel. And Peter Thiel, he was the one that put $15 million out for J.D. Vance to win a Senate bid, to help him win a Senate bid in Ohio, right? And so and Peter Thiel is Palantir, right? And so Alex Karp and Peter Thiel, they own and run Palantir. And if you understand what Palantir is the AI system that gathers all the info and can talk and communicate. So health records and education records can talk, and government records can talk, and Department of Transportation can talk. So it's this whole sort of communicating AI network. Palantir is obviously also AI drones, there's surveillance, so that's coming in. So I think
that might even answer some of those questions about what's going on in New Jersey with all these mysterious things.
I don't know the answer to that. I know.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of different theories coming out. But definitely Palantir was involved with some of the wars in the AI drone drone warfare, with some of the wars that we're in right now. And so that's where I think it's just questioning, and I don't think humanity is really doing this enough, is what do we think about this technology? Can this technology be reined in? Is it just unleashed? Do we have any level of control over that? But all of it really runs on data. And so I think then we come back to how is data being extracted from us in the worlds that we live in? Through our electronic health records, through our education records, through, the surveys or whatever we're supposed to do, when we're interacting with the government. So I think you really do start to get into these privacy issues and how can that be protected. And I just want to also take it a little bit farther, and I would say that what is Vermont about? Like, obviously we could answer that in 50 million ways, right?
Sure.
But community, humanity, interactions. And so one of the things that's really been on my mind a lot lately is like, as we sort of escalate into this whole sort of AI tech realm, which some people embrace, right? Yes. Some people absolutely love it. This is what they want. It gets them excited. And other people are like, no, I think I'm just going to hang by my wood stove and be in the woods. How do we create a space in Vermont where we can hold on to the human connection, the humanity connection, and we're not just expected to be interacting with our devices all the time, And I think that's something, to me, we have to start to question, because it's going to be really easy to lose that community connection and humanity with the tech that's coming in and where that goes. And that's the piece that I just want to emphasize, because we as humans haven't had the conversation of, what about AI drone warfare? And what about my electronic health records that are being shared with over 2 million different entities? So people think that HIPAA is privacy. Your HIPAA is not privacy. When you sign up for HIPAA, you are giving your consent away for data sharing. And most people do not realize that. And so that's because right now, health records, it's literally gold. It is a gold mine.
So talk to me a little bit about that, because it does. I completely do agree with you, by the way. The way things are going, we'd never have had a conversation about, is humanity ready to do this? Are we ready to become...
It's just, there we go.
Here we go. And it's very much based in this ideology of transhumanism, as far as I'm concerned. I think that there's been a push for a long time, possibly since the dawn of humanity, since we've created any tools for us to emerge with these said tools, especially today, as we're getting better and better at creating synthetic biological technologies. Right? It's a really big problem. But to that point, it's like, does it really even matter if we're, and this is a bigger question, does it really even matter if we're like merging with the technology, or is the brain-computer interface that we're already living within through our cell phones, through our other screens, through our computers, whatever it is, is there an alternate avatar of Paul Bean that exists?
Well, that's digital twinning.
So that's kind of like, there's a movie, I can't think of the name of the film right now. It's maybe called The Other Side or something like that.
Okay.
It's very strange, but it was kind of like a play on this idea, but I mean, not openly, right? They weren't openly, but if you understand anything about what I'm talking about, basically like there's this family, and then they find out that there's like their own doppelgangers that exist on the other side of it, and the way that their lives like converge and interact in strange ways, and it's like, like how many ideas of my own, Paul Bean's ideas, choices that I make, things who I voted for, ideas that I'm sharing, how many of them actually came from me?
Are you being nudged?
Or have I been nudged?
Right.
And this isn't like to get super schizophrenic, like everybody has a personal FBI agent or a CIA agent who's just like, what? No, that's not how it works. but AI could do it, and algorithms could do this. And
yeah.
talk to me a little bit about that, because I'm
Well,
getting
that's
off my reservation a little bit here.
Yeah,
So-
no, I think there's, again, so much to know. I mean, I have concerns. When I teach a Wellness for Life class at the Vermont State Colleges, one of the things that we look at is ethics in science. And so one of the things that I share is digital twinning. What do you think about digital twinning? So you, obviously, every time we're on our screens, we are creating a digital sort of blueprint of ourselves that can be used and tracked and monitored for insurance purposes. Do we qualify for insurance? People will take that to a whole other level of then, look at all the data collection and predictive modeling that's going on right now, right? With the climate, for example, with the environment, with financial forecasts, it's all this modeling. What about humans? Are we going to be digitally twinned? And again, legitimate question, right? And ethics around that. Can someone gather my digital twin, all my data from everything I've searched and done and everything they might have on me, and what can they do with that? Can they bet on me? Can they bet against me?
Yes.
Am I going to become a commodity? I mean, I already am a data commodity. We're all data commodities, and people will say privacy's dead, but to me, that's no, we can't do it. Because if you don't have privacy, you don't have freedom, and we all know the level of surveillance and censorship that's happening right now.
Well, and I think that's once again where I start to get really concerned too about the whole mass deportation thing. I'm not going to say that I agree. We need to get people out of our country that shouldn't be here, but it almost sometimes feels like to me like we're just being played on so many ends because, okay, we're going to open the border for 4 years. We're going to let everybody in, anyone and everybody. Right. And then the next administration is going to come along and they're going to crack down.
Right.
And how are they going to do that? Well, they're going to be needing to increase security and surveillance.
And biometrics.
And they're going to do that, right?
Does that justify Exactly.
Does that justify a new dystopian police state? That I do believe that Donald Trump, look, love him or hate him, he's a man. He's not an all-knowing person. He's not God, and I think he's flawed. I mean, he's fundamentally flawed, like all people, like all of us.
Right.
And same with all these other people who are in the back door pushing for all this, right? So I'm not going to say oh, he knows exactly what he's doing here. That's not fair to say that.
Right.
But it does concern me that somebody else might know what's being done. And that they're just using these people as mere chess pieces to kind of steer us once again
to push the agenda. Yeah.
So to that point, and I just pulled up the film. I just wanted to show it quickly. It's called Jordan Peele's Us, which is essentially it's a film once again about these doppelgangers on the other side of reality.
Yeah.
Very, very strange.
And is that predictive programming?
It is.
That
I think it's predictive programming.
Exactly.
Basically, just explaining what the idea is.
Right.
Are you familiar with Shoshana Zuboff?
Oh yeah, surveillance capitalism.
Surveillance capitalism. Can you?
Oh yeah.
You probably can do it a little bit better than I. I read this book back in college in Rob Williams' class actually. Project
nice.
Censored.
Oh, that's awesome. Of course.
And that first of all, shout out Rob Williams as always. Great guy. Hope he listens to this podcast because man, did he have an influence on my life in that time? Such an important time.
Amazing.
When I was at the University of Vermont and learning about all of this stuff, at that time I was definitely questioning my political views and where do I stand? And Rob was just this guiding light, hey, look, sure, Trump's got some stuff that he might be right about, but there's also this on the left, and don't get too tied into any of this because if you do, there's know what you're signing up for, basically.
Right. And keep the clarity and see the issues and not just become and that's where I'm not partisan. I'm always tried to remain independent, have ran as an independent because of all the reasons that you just said. What is the agenda? What are the steps that we might be moving towards it? We have to be aware because we know we've been taken advantage of and lied to so many times throughout history.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll say very clearly, I definitely, probably line more with the Republican conservatives, but I don't have affiliation to any political party because I know full-heartedly that once you buy into one or the other, and sure, maybe I've gone a little further on one end, but I just want to put it on the record, put it out there. It's I'm an independent human being, sovereign, independent human being.
Exactly.
And you can't force me into a box or a way of thinking simply based upon whatever you perceive me to be more like.
And I just want to go back to, if you don't mind, just talking about the just the digital twinning and the data piece, because one of the things, it was Estonia has all of their citizens, or maybe 99% of their citizens, on a blockchain identity system. So any sort of interaction that they have is lined up in their blockchain. So that is sort of their, their data profile, so to speak. The Ukraine, when we went into war, when we sort of started aiding Ukraine in the war.
Biden administration.
The Biden
we
administration.
Didn't do it,
Thank you.
No,
that's a really important point. Exactly. But that was one of the first things they implemented was a blockchain ID system. And so I think that this is something for us to be really aware of. They've put millions and millions of kids in Africa, in Ethiopia, on a blockchain ID, given them virtual reality glasses, given them screens, and again, what is it doing? It's drawing on the data. What do they say? What's the messaging? Oh, we're helping education in Ethiopia. So they are literally trying to line up. If they can get someone on a blockchain, they can collect all the data from them, and then where does it go from there? What do we do with that information? How is it going to be manipulated? We know that it is. So I think just keeping that piece. And the other last part on it, sorry if you don't mind me saying, is the NAACP. They came out in 2019, and in their information technology resolution, I don't have it with me, they laid out, maybe I can get it to you and you could link it.
I can pull it up probably.
Information technology, NAACP 2019. They specifically have all the reasons that we cannot allow a blockchain identity. A human should never, ever be put on a blockchain system.
I have pulled up right here.
Okay.
I'm just going to show it. It says, opposition to the use of blockchain identity. Whereas blockchain technologies are being developed as tools of digital identity and identity management, and whereas transaction of data pertaining to vital records, voting, ownership, healthcare, professional and education credentials, and employment and financial income can be stored on blockchain systems, and whereas global technologies interests are placing heavy pressure on governments to scale blockchain adoption as a financial tool within proposals to privatize public services, including the public-private partnerships, and whereas government interests are exploring the use of smart contracts on blockchains as a means of delivering public benefits, whereas it goes on and on and on.
Oh, exactly.
But the point is, and this is so I have a friend down in Miami, Florida. His name is Drew Tang. Shout out to Drew Tang. He has been steady. He's been steadfast in this point. Like, look, sure, it might be great. Trump's getting in there. Good guys have won. Blah blah blah. There is an agenda. Doesn't matter who the president of the United States is. Right. For a digital identification of all human beings. And eventually, this goes into the transhumanist thing. It's like, you will be marked with this digital identification. And if you want to participate in this, we could go deep into the theology of it, right?
I know.
This is the book of Revelations. Like, if you want to be able to participate and be a merchant, somebody who participates in selling and buying of items, of goods, you will need this mark. Right. And we just see this so clearly, and it's so crazy and creepy, and there's so many ways to think about it. But why is it that no matter who seems to be in charge, that this is the direction humanity seems to be going, even though we don't want it? I don't want it.
It's like this wave. I know.
And it does. It seems like even as a competitive advantage, right? Like it almost is. They always argue. It's like this is something we have to do. Right. And part of me is almost like, man, maybe it is, but I don't believe that. I don't want to go down that route. I believe a lot different. I have a different kind of faith.
Right.
They want to put their faith in technology. Right. I think there's a lot of people who are doing this kind of stuff too, because they have this idea where we can advance tech to this point where you're going to be able to upload your consciousness to the cloud.
That's the moonshot program in Japan.
Yes,
exactly.
It's very real.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people that are working on this.
And a lot of people who want it and love it. Exactly. And then you think of Elon Musk and the Neuralink. Didn't they say they just successfully did a Neuralink on the third person with Elon Musk? And again, for some people that is efficient and it's inviting and it's what they want. But I think that we also have to keep in mind natural life and people who will be like, I never want that stuff near me. And how do you create a space in a world where people can live in? Then we are going to land with, back to your question about Shoshana Zuboff.
Yeah, I wanted to get back
to surveillance capitalism. Sure. We're going to go back there because this is essentially what happened with the Amish. And they broke away and they said, we don't want that tech. Right? And they've embraced tech sort of along the way. So she talks about them as, they might use computers that they design themselves because they don't want to be tracked. They don't want to have that sort of influence coming in.
They're smart.
Yeah, and that's where it's, I think we're going to just reach this space. Like they always talk about like digital equity. It's like we got to make sure everybody has a phone, everybody has a screen, and that's fine if people want it. Of course people want it. I know I'm on my phone quite often.
Me
I know
too.
We're doing all our stuff.
All the time.
But the thing is like, shouldn't someone be able, and maybe this is, unrealistic, maybe it's idealistic, but shouldn't somebody be able to live in a world and not have to have this crazy layer of dependence of the tech and all of the services and the platforms to interact with the world? And that's where I go back to Vermont. Like, can Vermont keep this space where if I want to go to the store, I want to go to the store and I don't want to have it delivered to me by, an Amazon thing?
Can I go to a store and pay for it with cash?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those sort of basics that we have to hold on to. And also talking about natural life through that. Like, there's some people who will never embrace, like I know me for one, if anyone ever comes near me with an mRNA vaccine, I'm going to freak out.
Me too.
Get that away from me.
I've had nightmares about it.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
people need to be able to make those decisions. And same with the Neuralink, et cetera. And with the Shoshana Zuboff, like, what doesn't often get talked about is this is where she talks about specifically, and she's a Harvard sociologist.
Yes, she is.
If she still is. But when she wrote the book, she was. And she said the biggest message that she really pulled through was talking about how the CIA venture capital program, In-Q-Tel is who joined forces to create Pokemon. And so that's where, like, when you understand that
Pokemon Go.
Pokemon Go.
Yeah.
The app program.
I just want to clarify because that was
not the cards.
Pokemon Go was huge recently because they were able to use it for data harvesting on locations. That's why it was so popular in the first place.
Exactly.
Actually.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. And that's
nostalgic for everybody.
I know, because it is a flashback.
It's fun, but
right. But then you look at, like, that's the level of, like, the military contracts. Like, this is the information that they are after from a data standpoint, from a surveillance standpoint.
It's us.
It is. I know.
It's us. And it's becoming increasingly obvious that the financial end of all of this and the data end of it, it's all very much intertwined.
Oh, yeah.
The way that we think about money and the way that this is why people, like, were getting so freaked out during the COVID times about, like, medical and just medical freedom and autonomy, because people understand that these eventually connects to not just your actual medical records, but like your money.
Right.
They can see the path that this is going down.
And if everything becomes digital, what sort of, freedoms do we actually lose, or how could that be used against us? Like, those are the real ethics behind it. And people might want to say, oh, that would never happen, but it's possible. I just had a conversation with a man who lives in Canada, and he's a computer programmer for math programs for kids. And him and I started getting into the ethics of all this. And he said, because I said, you think robots are going to replace teachers? Like, what's that going to look like? In Japan, they're using robots for healthcare. What do you think about that? And he said he thinks, for what it's worth, that every child when they're born is going to be assigned an AI to go with them and process and help them to be their best person. And this is how it's going to be sold to us. And then, of course, my question, is, who's running the AI?
Yeah.
Who is behind the AI part? And this is where we have Vermont, I think, ultimately, at the heart, a lot of people in Vermont are about independence, right? And everything we're talking about here is layers of dependence.
Yeah.
And that's the piece where some people will accept some, because there's convenience, et cetera, in it. But then other people are going to be like, no, I don't want all of that. Same thing goes for, the solar panel piece. We could segue that into the energy piece where, do I really have to use Elon Musk's Tesla Powerwall and agree to his terms and conditions to access and use my power? Like, really? Is that the level of, like, an interface that I need?
Well, he's Mr. Freedom of Speech, so of course you got to depend on him for everything.
And then it's going to also be like, well, again, to access this power, to make sure it's you that really wants to use this power, we need your biometrics.
Yeah. We need you to scan your thumb. And
so we agree to all this stuff.
We do. I just want to read a comment here I have from Abu Kakar Nawaz. I'm sorry, I totally just butchered your name. But he writes, it is imperative that AI be subjective to regulation. In today's fiercely competitive global landscape, it is essential that we stay ahead of the curve in order to maintain world order. Take, for instance, the DeepSeek technology. While AI advancements hold great promise, it is crucial that regulations be put in place to mitigate ethical biases. To achieve this, it is necessary for elected officials to establish a committee dedicating to reviewing the implications of AI and crafting regulations that prioritize fairness. By ensuring that AI is properly regulated, we can foster a technological environment that upholds principles of fairness and equity. And listen, I appreciate you out there commenting. I don't mean to be a jerk here by saying this, but did you write that with AI?
Right.
You know, and I'm dead serious. I'm not even kidding.
I know.
I'm not even, listen, I'm not trying to be a jerk here.
Right.
Your name and your, like, is that a real commenter? And I deal with this all the time on Facebook. I run social media accounts. If you scroll through Facebook right now, I'm dead serious. You scroll through, there's a few accounts that I run. It's all AI.
It is.
And it's all AI. It's not even real people. All the pictures are fake. It's fake headlines, fake news. It's like, what is this app? It's not even a real app anymore. Meta has come out on the record and said, you know, we're flooding our social media sites with fake avatars. Why?
I know.
What's the point? What are you doing?
And that's where I think we just have to go local and go state, because this is what we can influence and try to create the space that we want versus what's happening on a federal level, what's happening on a global level. You know, obviously all of that's important, and that tech is there, and some people are going to use it. But he brought up the DeepSeek thing, which was that's China's newest development on the AI, like the reasoning AI that can solve problems and is worth, I think it costs like a tenth. It's so much less expensive. So people are saying, oh, that's why the stock market just fell in the tech sector. I don't know if you heard any of that stuff.
A little bit.
Yeah, and so they were just basically talking about how, you know, China's beating the U.S. So, you know, we've had the arms race. People say there's an AI race. But I also think at the heart of it all, it's a data race. You know, it's like we as humans are constantly producing data. Nature is constantly producing data. And I hate to think of it like that, but that's what wants to be monitored. That's what wants to be harvested.
Well, that is just it. And I think when you do make that segue into like the energy sector, right? And even take AI for example. I mean, another thing that they talked about with climate change, Peter Welch, representative from Vermont, drawing he introduced a bill, or he at least co-sponsored a bill, that would use AI to monitor the weather and effects of climate change.
It's insane how much energy. So like on one hand, someone can talk about like, you know, energy conservation or carbon, and then how much energy will that take? And the data centers and the water. Oh my goodness, that's insane. I hadn't even heard that.
I'll pull it up just so you have a take on it, and it's actually a Vermont Daily Chronicle article. I didn't write it. I think Guy did.
Okay.
But it's like just one of those things where I say this again and again and again. It's like everything in the energy industry, specifically renewable energy industry, it is not good for the environment in any way, shape, or form, and in fact directly contributes to the problem. So like today, when you see Bernie Sanders grilling RFK Jr. about climate change, do you believe that climate change is an existential threat to humanity? And it's like RFK sitting there, and he actually says, yes, I do. But as you and I have discussed, I think he's talking more about geoengineering, but Bernie didn't ask the question the right way. But the point is like all this Green New Deal, all this stuff. I think Bernie, for example, genuinely believes in a lot of the stuff that he pushes. I don't think he's lying. I don't know, maybe you disagree. But
no, I think so.
I think he's pretty genuine. But like, if he wants to keep kind of like sounding the alarms, right? Dude, it's time to like get serious then. You want to talk about climate change? Let's start talking about the negative externalities of having AI monitor the weather. Is there any? If there are, should we know about them? Right? Or how about the solar panels? You know, one of the things he said, do you think, you know, Donald Trump thinks that climate change is a hoax that originated in China, like making the comparison almost to like the flu or the coronavirus.
Right.
But it's like, actually, if you look at what he's actually saying, it's like, no, they're spewing coal, right? They're coal particulate pollution into the atmosphere, and then it's going through the air in the atmosphere, and it's landing on the United States. So, you know, like, why aren't they, and I would love to hear your take on that, like Bernie Sanders, for example, Vermont guy, Peter Welch. Who is backing these guys, and is there AI like, why are they not?
I know, and I can't speak to that because I certainly don't know, but what I could say specifically is this brings me to why my representative, Greg Burt, who's Cabot Peachum Danville, we've been working closely on a bill, and we're calling it essentially the Clean Air, like Vermont Clean Air Bill, because we really want to talk about the fact that Vermont currently does not have a policy about pollution when we're talking about weather modification experiments or research, and when we're talking about radiation being emitted from our towers as well. So the 1996 Telecom Act preempts wireless communications and telecommunications between people, but right now those towers are being rented out for weather monitoring and data collection. And so there's a lot more power output, and the radiation that comes from them is also being used to gather up the data, say, on precipitation and rainfall, et cetera. So I just have here that I did bring, because I think this is so important, is there's a congressionally mandated research plan and initial research governance framework related to solar radiation modification from June 2023. That was from the White House. And then we also have the United States Government Accountability Office, the GAO, who did a technology assessment on cloud seeding technology, and this one is from December 2024. So what we're talking about here is this is going on. Obviously, we've been cloud seeding a ton out west. And really, the GAO report is essentially saying after 80 years, it doesn't seem to be effective. We don't know what we're doing. We can't get a handle on this. But what we do know is that there are massive weather events happening, and we've been doing this for a long period of time. And what's not being looked at, obviously, is what does this impact have on the weather patterns? And then also in this GAO report from the US government, they specifically talk about how in India and in China, they're trying to do weather experiments to help, prevent hurricanes and monsoons. So again, what is that impact having here? And so we can
why is nobody talking about it?
They're not talking about it,
Yeah.
exactly. And this is where basically we're coming down to, obviously last year, as you're well aware, because this has been your world for a while, Tennessee passed a bill that they're saying, we want to ban this, we don't want this experimentation, this research, whatever you want to call it, this pollution happening in our state. And some people will say, oh, that's pointless. It's pointless because, that's just one state. But it has to start somewhere.
Oh, of course.
And right now there are 22 states with bills in some way, shape, or form that are saying, you know what, you guys may have approved, in your congressional report, you may have approved what you're calling research. You can't call it experimentation because that brings liability. But you're going to do this research. And Vermont, this is where I feel like Vermont has to get more in a position to flex its state power. It really has to say, no, as a state, we don't agree to this. We don't want you experimenting or researching with this technology and this level of pollution here.
Yeah.
We don't want you impacting the health and the welfare of the humans, our rivers, our soils, our ag land, et cetera. So all the bill is that we're looking at, it hasn't been released with the number yet, is we want to have a Vermont policy. If the federal government and globally, if this is happening, if we're seeing solar radiation modification happening, right, and they're saying we're going to do some research, Vermont as a state has a right to say, we want to create our own policy. We want to look at this and be able to say yes or no. Because with Tennessee, what happened is they didn't put enforcement. So now they're kind of scrambling and they're like, oh, shoot, we did this, but we don't have a way to enforce it. So we're putting enforcement.
Well, I was just going to add, and I think the problem in Tennessee, and I think all the states are going to run into this issue, is they were told by federal authorities that, yes, they were not able to enforce this law because the federal government has jurisdiction over the atmosphere and really the climate as a whole. So basically, the Clean Air Act, which was signed or created in 1963, amended a handful of times, probably 3 times. Interestingly enough, the Clean Air Act, so just quickly, Clean Air Act is what stops states from being able to do anything about this. They say, no, federal government regulates this, right? So the federal government, of course, has control over the country's atmosphere. Of course they do. Naturally, the Air Force wants that. They want to have full spectrum dominance of the whole globe, including our own. But anyway, part of that, California, through the Clean Air Act of 1963, it was amended in 1970, which gave California through, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but through some loophole legislation where that gave them the grounds and authority to regulate tailpipe emissions. So
it was used through that.
Yeah, and so to take it a step even further, so that's when they started doing a lot of different things back in the 70s to they wanted to get gas. Basically, they were low on gas back then too. That was also part of it. There was a gas shortage. But then in the mid-90s and then now today, you have all this climate legislation that we're tied to as a state. The state of California is the leader of all of this. They're the spearhead driving all this stuff in the direction.
And Vermont keeps trying to
and
follow.
So as part of that, right, so it's very interesting that the same law that stops the states from climate change, or excuse me, from geoengineering legislation and banning it ultimately, it's the same law that makes it so that in 2035 we have to have 100% electric vehicles. That is tied to the Clean Air Act, right? So you can take this even a step further. So take it in Vermont. Yeah, been 10 years, 2035. 100% of vehicles in the state have to be electric cars.
Yes.
So in 2026.
Unfortunately, I just want to say Rep. Mark Higley from Lowell, fortunately has a bill that many people have signed on to get rid of that because that's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. And I think it'll get squashed.
But they're saying essentially that by 2026, 35%
yes.
of on the lots.
All new cars sold. So anything coming from a manufacturer has to be 35% of Formula Ford has to be electric vehicles. And if they don't sell, they sit on the lot.
Right.
So it's going to happen, just to explain this for people listening, what'll happen if this goes through, they go through with this, these auto manufacturers are just going to start sending less inventory because they're not just going to let vehicles sit, and then people who are forced to make a choice, like, all right, well, I don't want to buy this electric vehicle, they're just going to go to New Hampshire and they're going to buy a car in New Hampshire, and you're going to crush all the small businesses in the state. And by the way, if you're an auto manufacturer and you're not meeting these standards within these states, you can. This is the funniest part about it. You can buy carbon credits from electric vehicle manufacturers. So Elon Musk.
Exactly.
Boom!
I know.
You get it immediately.
I know. So I was talking to some of the legislators about this.
It's literally mind-blowing how they have the legislation it's like Satan's web, dude.
I know.
It's like,
and it's literally, again, you're back to those credits, and this is where it's differentiating between like corporate environmentalism and real environmentalism. And this corporate environmentalism is all about the carbon credits and the car credits and the biodiversity credits. It's insane.
Yeah, which is in this new age, right? I mean, you look at the past, a lot of our institutions that have failed us, right? It could be the medical industry, it could be the school industry, but the churches as well.
Right.
And Guy's son, Tim, wrote this excellent article explaining indulgences within the Catholic Church, which, by the way, massive institution, which has had its issues over the years. Done a lot of great work too, I will say.
Yep.
But point is,
that was a great article.
Yeah, it was a great article. And the point is, it's like this in this new world with this new religion, which is this new age weird stuff that we're seeing. And I see this in the Trump administration specifically. Like there's like a political / new age religious kind of like thing going on. And it's not just in of course the conservative end of the spectrum. This is happening on the left as well.
Yeah.
But it's like there's these very it's like the way we do things, we're so religious by nature. And like this idea of indulgences even within the carbon world.
Oh yeah.
It's so real.
I know.
It's so real.
And again, what do? We sort of go back to, we're creating a commodity. It can be traded on the market. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It does go back to that. Commodities, markets, and we're ultimately worshiping this golden calf of the economy.
It is.
Which you know what? Some days I just wake up and I just wonder, like, I don't know. Is humanity just fundamentally flawed, and we're just always going to go down these paths?
I think we just have to like keep standing up for it. I think like our web and our network of people who do love humanity and do love the environment and aren't in it for the money, it's growing, and people see it and they want to reclaim that. And I think it's always going to be humanity's struggle, right? We're just like in this moment right now, and it's obviously has reached ahead on many levels. But did you I don't know if you saw it, there was a company called One Amazon, and they essentially, this is absolutely insane, they are promoting the Internet of Forests. And right now they have sold off hectares not sold off, they've basically collateralized. They are taking the Amazon rainforest and they're wanting to set up sensors and surveillance satellite. And this is where I will say, and I don't know what people are going to think about this, and maybe people feel differently, and please enlighten me if you disagree with this, but Howard Lutnick is who Trump has put out for his Department of Commerce. He is incredibly scary to me. He owns Satellogic. So Satellogic is a satellite surveillance company. So this is basically now where we get into the surveillance of nature and humans, right? And if you have the Internet of Forests in the Amazon, what they're saying is we're going to do sensors and we're going to satellite surveil it, because then we can, in each hectare, we can figure out how much carbon is being sequestered, so how many carbon offsets we can sell, how much biodiversity, and to boot, we are going to hire the indigenous people, and we are going to make them the quote-unquote stewards, because they're not already the stewards, and we're going to give them a job, and we're going to make them the data collectors, and they're going to be guarding this space, and then we can securitize. So then basically they're using this for debt collateral. So they're saying, and they're selling it as like, wouldn't it be so much better if we can conserve land and make money compared to destroy the land? And okay, maybe there's an argument there, but look at what they're doing. Massive surveillance for credits that can be sold on the market. And so far it sounds like, if I'm correct, and I think I remember this properly, that a size that in the Amazon, basically the country of Spain.
5.5 million kilometers squared.
Is that how big the Amazon is?
No, that's how big this space is that they're trying to do
the Spain size, yes, yeah.
So I pulled up the website here, and I'm just going to click on the video and see if it'll play just quickly. Folks, if you can't hear the sound, just write in the comments.
Yeah, it's insanity.
But it should play.
And it's
we could save the Amazon rainforest by helping people profit from its preservation. What if landowners and investors stood to earn more through conservation than deforestation? What if we could protect the largest rainforest on Earth by harnessing the power of blockchain technology and financial markets? One Amazon is crypto with a purpose, regulated by financial markets. We combine the power of the market and blockchain technology.
So I'm just going to stop that right there, folks. Hopefully you got an idea of what that was. And if there were any sound issues, feel free to let me know. But I do have the website pulled up here, and I'm just going to read a little bit off of it to you, just so, Allison, you have a little bit of context for what I'm saying, because you can't see it. But it says, one, Amazon brings innovation to conservation, transforming the Amazon biome into a digital asset security for sustainable environment impact. See, now, like, this is like the stuff that they would teach at like the Grossman School of Business at UVM.
Listen to the buzzwords in that.
It's so many.
It's insane.
Preserving the most valuable asset on the planet. As the world's largest, most diverse tropical rainforest, the Amazon is a critical part of our global ecosystem. It's a lifeline for millions of people and countless species, playing a crucial role in regulating the Earth's climate and oxygen supply. Its preservation is essential for sustaining life.
So they're going to preserve
it.
So Wall Street, corporate Wall Street's going to preserve it for us, and they're going to surveil it, and they're going to make credits, and this is how they're going to justify their conservation, justify their efforts, is because they can make money.
This is crazy. Listen to this. Innovative investment model. The One Amazon Digital Asset Security is backed up by a 30-year land contract. It facilitates sustainable development and environmental stewardship without transferring land ownership, aligning economic interests with the preservation of the rainforest. Proceeds from the digital asset security are dedicated to an infrastructure fund aimed at preserving the Amazon biome and creating jobs. This ensures that the rainforest protection goes hand in hand with local community development. You mean just like they do here in Vermont? Just like they do here in Vermont, hand in hand with the native Vermonters, or whatever you want to call people that have lived here. I guess we're not native, right?
I know.
But it's just crazy. It reminds me so much of like the 30 by 30, 50 by 50.
I was literally just going to go to that. So like this is where, and who do we have involved in that? I went to that this summer. You were there also.
I was there.
The Nature Conservancy is very heavily involved. The Nature Conservancy is thriving off of their carbon market, absolutely thriving off of their carbon market. So if there can be more conserved land, the Nature Conservancy is involved, how is that going to play out? I actually tried to talk to Amy Sheldon about this, but she doesn't even want to have a conversation. And I keep trying to talk to her. She's the chair of the House Committee on Environment, right? And I keep trying to talk to her about is this carbon credit road really the road we want to go on? Or if we're going to do it, how can it serve, if there's no way to say no, how can it serve Vermont and how can it serve Vermonters? New Hampshire legislation is looking at this right now because Bono's Blue Source, Bono from U2, right? They had bought up his company, I think it's called Blue Source, but
I'm looking it up right now.
It's all tied with the Sustainable Development Goals and the UN Sustainable Development Goals there. But anyway, they brought up over 100,000 acres of forest land in New Hampshire, and the town, of course, is being concerned because they're going to lose some money because they want to just put it in carbon sequestration. So they're going to make money on their carbon offsets because who wants to buy it? Taylor Swift and Amazon and all the people who want to offset, the lifestyles that they're living, et cetera. And so New Hampshire has now been forced into this conversation to talk about how are we going to deal with these lands that are put in for carbon sequestering. So I just think, again, it has to come through because Vermont has to have this conversation. And I'll go back to Representative Mark Higley. He's amazing. He's got the revoke the California clean car. He's got the repeal the Global Warming Solutions Act, which we can all talk about these if you want.
Yeah,
I think most people are very, very familiar with how important these are to get Vermont right back on a good track. But I would say back to the 30-30, Representative Higley just put a bill in, and I think Guy wrote about it, to include, oh no, it was you. Was it you or Guy? Anyway,
Might have been me.
To include the current use land
I think Guy did, actually.
in the 30 by 30.
Guy, you're saying Guy just wrote this.
I think he wrote it recently, but that would put in, current use land would put in 2.57 million acres into this 30 by 30. Ultimately, I'd love to get rid of the 30 by 30. I think it's incredibly dangerous, and it's not the proper way to watch out for our resources and conserve our land. But I think there's going to be pushback on this current use, but that would solve the problem. That would put us to it. And that's, again, a Rep. Higley bill, and a bunch of people did sign on to that.
Yeah, no, and I think we should definitely, let's get into some of the local stuff. So just so that folks that are not aware, 30 by 30, 50 by 50, just to reiterate, is the bill that was passed?
Well, it's an act
It's
now.
an act.
Yep,
okay.
act. Oh gosh, I forget. Sorry, 59.
I wouldn't know, but I have written about it. I'm not completely uneducated.
Yeah, I think it's
swear.
59.
Where they want to conserve 30% of all land in Vermont by the year 2030 and 50% of all land in Vermont by 2050. And some of the argument about this is what the definition of conserved land is, and a lot of folks, Amy Sheldon being one of them, would say that conserved land would not include agricultural working land. So somebody who is has 100 acres farm for maple syrup, that wouldn't be counted. So they I think what they want ideally is just humans to just not exist. No, I'm just kidding. They just wish that we just didn't need food.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. It's very weird, but
we need these working lands.
We need the working lands, and
Right.
there really isn't enough land in this country or in Vermont for us to get real crazy about restricting growth. I mean, look, I don't want Vermont to look like the rest of this country.
Exactly.
I do not want it to look like
Right.
West Virginia and just these big billboards and signs for McDonald's everywhere.
Oh,
I hate it.
I'm from near Philly, exactly.
It's so ugly, and
I
hate. I don't hate it, but I
know.
don't love it.
Right.
And I don't want Vermont to look like that. But to that point, we can't commoditize our land so much where people can't afford to grow their own food and sustain their family farm.
Access resources. And that's where it's conservation versus preservation. And I think that they're talking about conservation into perpetuity, forever. And that needs to be looked at.
Well, that's what I guess I don't understand is when they say things like conserve land, 30% of it by 2030 and all of it by 2050. How are we going to do that? How is that even
and that's what they're trying to figure out.
It doesn't even make sense. Long term, eventually they're just going to have to get rid of that bill because there's not enough land. Apparently.
What counts?
And then I will say, not that I'm in super support of this, but Canada becoming the 50th state at that point, or Greenland. Yeah, it's maybe that is. I mean, long term, that's what's going to happen. I mean, Canada, Greenland, even Mexico probably. Eventually, it's going to be part of a giant thing, in my opinion.
And that goes back to 1970s and Trilateral Commission, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it has to happen. Not that it's another one of these things where are we going? We got to compete with China. And this actually does connect to the geoengineering and a lot of that kind of stuff. It's it almost is there's all this land up north that's just untouched secretly, nobody really thinks much of. And I always used to love to think oh, if things got real bad, I could just run up north. But actually you can't, because that's where a lot of this stuff is going on as well.
Right.
So my question is they don't want Trump to annex Canada.
Right.
We can't we got to conserve all land, 50% of it by 2050 in Vermont. How it, like, just the math, just like the simple thinking of all this stuff. How is this going to work? Like, and it just doesn't make any sense to me.
And that's where we have to, I think, really just go back to stewardship and taking care of our resources and looking at it that way. And that's what's being lost is like, I think they would say they're not doing this, but ultimately you're trying to create this space where people can't go and people can't responsibly use resources. And that's where I have such a problem with that bill. And I really hope that the current use will be able to be wrapped into that, but I know there's already pushback on it happening.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is like this idea that like it is working lands, and the land is very fluid with us as it is for itself, right? I mean, like if you were to look at some of the lands over the years that has been maintained and stewarded by, for example, my family, right? Some of it used to look a lot different than it did 50 years ago than it does now.
Right.
It changes.
Right.
They develop. They use it for grazing. They let trees grow. They, and John Rogers has talked a lot about this, like true environmentalism, which is what he's up at his farm, where there's a lot of this, carbon sequestering crops, like crops that you can grow that actually will hold carbon.
And if we even want to play the carbon game.
Well, that's what
the other thing.
And that's the thing. So like to his point, look, I get it. He's lieutenant governor.
Right. He's amazing.
He's amazing, and he wants to go the distance. I'm happy.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's like we're still in Vermont constantly talking about things in this frame, and I really want to talk about this with you because this has been, as I've been excited, things have been better in the State House, don't get me wrong.
Yes.
And I think
we're grateful.
I'm so grateful things have changed. You and I are probably two people who, no matter how good things have gotten, we're still going to be wanting things to get better.
Right.
That's why we're here.
Right, to help. That's what
we're on this earth for, right? That's our purpose. This is where we're supposed to participate. But, I still want to see things exit the frame of like, okay, so we're trying not to piss off the woke crowd. We're just trying to we're trying to throw a dog a bone and appease them all the time. But to that point, that's how we've ended up in the situation in the first place. That's how Vermont has become so bad.
Right.
And I don't mean to pick on Scott Beck specifically because I think he's done an excellent job.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so thankful that he's a state senator. And I think he's somebody that we can put our faith in. But there's like one thing he said, there's a handful of things he said in this most recent press conference, but like one of them was talking about Trump's executive orders, right? And how the most concerning one was the one that had to do with there only being two genders. Okay. That's the one he was most concerned about. And to me, it's just like...
And I didn't catch the comments at the press conference on that.
He said that's the one that's most concerning. And I'm like, okay, like maybe he believes that. I don't know. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But the point is like, really?
Right.
I could sit here and tell you 5 of them that I actually am concerned with.
Right.
But that's the one you're most concerned with?
That's the one, right.
I don't know. To me, it's just like, we're constantly doing this thing where we're like playing this game. For who?
I know.
For who? Where are they?
And I think
how much money do they have?
So many across the board sort of different opinions on it. And I guess that's where I have such a libertarian streak in the sense of I really don't care what someone wants to be, especially like as an adult, you go do your thing, like whatever, you want to do that. I mean, that's where I land. When you start talking about children, I'm like, Yeah. When you are a child, even when you're a young adult, you are in a perpetual identity crisis.
Oh, yeah.
Who am I? What am I doing? Where am I going?
Until you're 25.
Yeah.
Or more.
And that's where I think I personally am, and this is just my own personal opinion, totally 100% against transgender surgeries and testosterone and hormone blockers in children.
I know, and I'll add.
And I've never said that like straight out because I always tend to have my stuff I focus on, and that's not one of them. Adult, feel free, go do your thing, but children, oh my goodness, break my heart.
I think the majority of Americans feel that same way.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way. Jerry Zeller just nailed it about the children. It's a really important point to be made, and I think I don't know, maybe it's like Becca Ballant. She's constantly talking about protecting trans kids.
I know.
And it's just like...
And it comes from this good place, but she's so into identity politics, and that is such a dangerous stance.
It actually is a good point. It should be noted that, I do believe her emotions are genuine. She feels strongly about this, and it's not just an act. But the points that she's making, it's like, whoa, like holy cow.
I know.
And I really don't want to be mired to that specific point that I made there, but I'm making a point about a broader issue. Whatever, that whole, okay, fine, you guys want, but it's like as a whole, we're still doing this dance with climate change being real and caused by carbon emissions.
Right.
Okay, like maybe we should talk about geoengineering and weather modification. Maybe we should address
It has
that.
to become part of the bigger conversation.
It does, and maybe
And 22 states signing in legislation, to bring that in, like that's going to force the conversation. We're almost at half of the states who have some legislation. And you know what? It's totally nonpartisan.
It is totally nonpartisan.
It's Democrats, it's Republicans, it's people who dive in and go, whoa, this stuff has been happening. Oh my gosh, we got to start to talk about this and figure out what to do. It's ridiculous. You're talking about sulfur dioxide, you're talking about chaff with aluminum on it, you're talking about PFAS that's coated on some of these things too. And that brings us to, maybe we should talk about, if you don't mind, there's such a buzz in the State House, obviously, right now,
PFAS.
about the PFAS.
Oh, yeah.
And hopefully something will come through, because obviously the EPA has failed the people. I mean, I see that in my nutrition practice all the time. FDA has failed the people just for literally more than a century. And EPA coming in and saying, oh, oops, whoops, there's, like 14,000 different chemicals that we're finding. Well, I'm sort of jumping into the sludge thing, but there's a bunch of different types of PFAS, and they're obviously just ubiquitous. They are absolutely everywhere. So right now, obviously, in the House and in the Senate and over at the State House in general, there's like, who's going to do a bill? We have to prohibit the land application. Representative Maslin tried to do a bill, but it's pretty bogus. It's like, we're going to test and we're still going to apply.
And his heart's in the right place.
His heart's
is totally in the right place.
But we are, as one of my dear friends who I work with closely, like there, he's like, we're 20 years beyond that. Like, that's just
it's so far
way
behind,
back. Exactly.
And that's where I fear drawing it back to not just the PFAS situation, but AI, geoengineering, like all of it. Like, all this stuff has been happening behind closed doors. I don't know how else to put it.
If the state doesn't, if we don't start
far
talking
behind
about this stuff, and that's where it's going to be decided for us if we don't start having more of these like real open, honest conversations, as hard as they are. And that's where, like, one of the big things, like, I think of my mom, and this is heartbreaking, and I hope I'm not going to cry as I say it. My parents, I have 3 sisters. We're all on the same page when it comes to the COVID vaccines and that whole sort of thing. We tried with all of our heart and soul to share with our parents information. Please don't do this. Please don't do this. At least make an informed decision. My dad ran a hospital. They're like lockstep. My parents have had 7 COVID vaccines.
Oh my goodness.
Each. My mom, since then, let me just explain this really quickly.
That's insane.
My mom has had, since she's had her COVID vaccines, breast cancer.
Oh no.
Parkinson's disease, and now she has peritoneal cancer. It's heartbreaking. These are her decisions. I respect them. I love her with all my heart and soul. The reason I bring it up is because she's having experimental chemotherapy right now because of her cancer. Where does that go? It's excreted through her feces. So we're talking about one of the biggest things with the PFAS right now in the State House is to prohibit the land application of sludge or biosolids, human waste, because what's in there? We've got PFAS in there. We've got heavy metals in there. You talk to a lot of the old-time farmers, and they would say, I would never let that stuff be applied on my land. I don't want that because of the heavy metals. Now we've got PFAS. I think there's over 14,000 different chemicals that have been identified in human waste. And it's still being applied, not as much as it used to be, to fields. And I was thinking of that with my mom, thinking it's also pharmaceuticals. It's also experimental pharmaceuticals that are going onto agricultural land. So that's a big conversation right now happening over there.
I think at a bottom line, though, like, we've lost touch with what the human body is meant to do for us. Right. We've lost touch with what the technology of the human body actually is. And it is a form of biotechnology. And it's not biosynthetic.
But it's beautiful. It's like amazing.
This is real like creation
incredible.
Right here. And if we lean into our natural abilities more and more, we're going to find that we're better off. I think it was actually Gad Saad was talking about this last night on the Joe Rogan podcast, which I still listen to frequently. I enjoy a lot of his guests. Yeah. And he's obviously a huge inspiration to me. I mean, just be very clear. Found him when I was a freshman in college.
No, you're like our Vermont
Joe Rogan.
I love
Joe
Rogan.
Rogan. I love Joe. I think he's so amazing.
Yep.
But point is, Gad Saad was saying, like, we have all these different evolutionary functions within human body, and prior to the modern era, these evolutionary functions really benefited us. But post-modern era, where we are today, these evolutionary functions actually do the opposite and they actually hurt us. So a perfect example of this would be back when you were living hunter-gatherer and you had to, like, scavenge for your food, you would eat, if you had the opportunity, you would eat a lot of fatty and sweet fat food, like foods that would very rich and just like
hold you through.
Yeah, hold you through, and like your body will retain for a while. But today, because we have so much free access to all of that kind of stuff, or at least stuff that tastes like it, so like sweet tasting foods, it does the opposite, and it's actually a disadvantage. It's a biological evolutionary disadvantage. And there's so many things like that today that we have. You know, take the COVID illness, you know, that was created in a lab, which, by the way, they've admitted.
Right, I know. There's.
When are we gonna?
And that's like a whole other podcast.
Other podcast. But the point is like, okay, so here's this thing created in a lab. Your body can fight it off still. I've never had COVID. Have you ever had COVID?
I don't know because
I don't think I had it. I mean, I've tested a lot. I never had it, and I was.
I mean, I've certainly been sick. I've
been sick since, but I haven't. But I've been testing.
Yeah.
I have tested. I've been for a long time. But the point I'm making is like, the human body is resistant to this stuff, even if it was created in a lab. But you don't need to take a shot that is going to save you from it.
I know.
And like these biological evolutionary functions that used to benefit us still can benefit us today. If you stop, and this was another thing that Rogan was saying too, it's like if you stop eating all the crap, and you just focus on like eating protein.
Stuff, and it's difficult for people to say no to sugar and to say no to those things.
Well, I'm appearing to have some technical difficulties. I think this happened even last time that we did our interview.
Okay.
It started to like freeze up. I think we still have audio, but the cameras seem to have shut off. So I think this is probably a good stopping point. We've gone for about an hour.
Okay. Did you want to talk about any more local stuff, or do you think the tech is?
I'm a little. It's like totally frozen. If you're out there listening right now, please let us know if you can hear me in the chat. If you can hear me, please write into the chat. Paul, I can hear you.
Right.
But it does appear to be frozen.
Okay.
And I have literally no idea why. So I think it might be just a good place to wrap up for today.
Okay. And we can talk on some local stuff a different time.
Yeah, we might have to. And I think I would love to get you in here once a month to be able to do this.
That'd be awesome. I'd totally be excited.
So we can have updates on the things that you're working on. And I really do just want to say I appreciate your perspective so much, because it keeps me grounded.
Right back at you.
It keeps me grounded in like, okay, I get excited about RFK, I get excited about Trump, I get excited. Well, wait a minute. This is the stuff that comes along with them too.
I know. It's like the issues, looking at the issues.
I think we lose, we give up a lot of power in this country. A lot of people are willing to do this. We give up a lot of power by putting our faith in these people.
I know.
Because the reality is there's still a social contract that goes along with voting for these people.
Right.
And you have a responsibility to maintain an understanding of this.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that you do such a good job at reminding me of that.
Okay,
As
good.
excited as I get about, Elon Musk's of the world doing the great work. Well, wait a minute.
Right,
I don't know.
Right.
And I just have a couple comments. They say they can hear us.
Okay.
And Jerry Zeller writes, it's probably AI controlling your podcast. Probably is. I bet we're getting bopped on YouTube or something right now.
Well, I think it's actually really important, if they can hear, to talk about some more of the local stuff going on.
Yeah.
Because, that's where we, again, have more influence. That's where we can actually, make some changes and do some good work when, nationally and globally things are so far away. You tell me.
Let's do it. Let's just keep going. I'm gonna while we're doing it. Let's continue trying to figure out. I'll try to figure out if I can get this to continue working.
But if people can hear,
and if you can see us and we're moving, feel free to let us know too. Anything goes, writes Bellows Falls High School football rules.
Sounds good.
Okay. So with that,
right.
So what else is going on locally?
Yeah, so
what are
I
some of the things
wanted to talk
you're
about
focused
the
on?
PFAS thing, and I'm really hoping there's going to be a bill in there, because again, on a state level, this is what we can influence to try to protect our lands and our food security, and agricultural lands and our water. So I really, really am hoping that prohibit the land application of biosolids and sludge because of PFAS and other chemicals will go through. And then, I feel like in general, as you had already said, there's such a good feel, like a better feel in the State House and that whole piece that's going on.
This is true.
Yeah, and I wanted to also talk about the Green Mountain Care Board again.
Okay.
Or not again, but I want to talk about them. right now, what a lot of Republicans want on and what a lot of Vermonters seem to want is affordability, right? And so we have so much money that is being spent right now that needs to be reined in. We see it in the Agency of Education. You know, Jay Eshelman, who is very involved with VDC and always has so much to offer and is such a brilliant man when it comes to the education finance. And, you know, I just look at, can we first sort of audit and de-bloat that bureaucracy in the Agency of Education? How many people are there collecting data? How much work is redundant? You know, what can we do? So I really feel like we need to go through and look at some of these agencies and what's happening. Like Senator Renner, she was a senator last year. She did not get reelected. She was on the Joint Information Technology Oversight Committee, and she just wrote this amazing memo to that committee, specifically calling out, we need better oversight. There are literally over $100 million being spent on our information technology in the state. And what can we do to try to rein in some of those costs and make sure that there is oversight on spending? Because she was able to really identify, they got a report, they got it 3 days before they were supposed to vote on it, and it was for millions and millions of dollars that they could not go through properly. You know, so I think that there's some...
When did she get that?
That was last year.
That was when she was a state senator.
That was when she was a state senator.
Just to be clear, I want to be clear about that because she did, unfortunately, well, it doesn't really make a difference. Greg Matos, is that who beat her?
Matos, Senator Matos beat her.
Exactly,
yeah.
So I mean, he's a Republican, but I do, from my understanding, is Renner was,
she was very, a Democrat, but she was just a centrist.
She was very centrist, and she would work with everybody, and I don't think she was super hard-nosed D on anything.
No,
she was actually awesome. Pretty cool.
She was on the issues. She was just on point with the issues a lot of times.
She was definitely one of those seats where, hey, got flipped, but it might have been the same way anyway.
Right.
And I did see her today at the State House, actually, and she was sitting there with Steve Whitaker.
Yes.
Who Steve Whitaker says, hey, you know, I heard you've been working on an IT story, and I was like, oh, what? Like,
I want to interview Renner when she does. Yeah, but I'm going to interview her.
Well, and I think that's to the point though is there obviously is a story there.
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of data even in the state of Vermont on our own students, and maybe talk to us a little about that. I guess. Yeah. So what does that look
that's
like?
where I feel like, just back to sort of what Redder's working on, is there's a company called Workday, and they do sort of payments. It seemed like they do a lot of the payroll.
Yeah.
And it's AI oriented.
I've been on Workday before when I worked. Where did I work? They had that.
So you know that.
Yeah. Let me think. I think maybe Sugarbush used that, or maybe I think it was Sugarbush.
Okay, so that's one of the things that they were trying to roll in, and I think it was just voted on that was going to be rolled in. But Iowa has walked away from it. Oregon is considering walking away from it. It's costing a lot of money. There's concerns about AI and breaches and privacy, et cetera. And so she did an awesome memo to that committee, pointing out these issues and really requesting, like, we need better oversight on this because it's a lot of money spent. You know, so you look at what's obviously going on with education finance, and there's so many people in the Agency of Education, and not that I want to see anybody lose jobs, but we have to be looking at that part of it. So there's that part. There's the Agency of Digital Services that it seems like needs a little bit more. Needs to be some more oversight happening there because of the money piece. There's obviously questions around the free school lunches, you know, as a money source, like what can be done around that. That was a good chunk of money as well.
That's right. You brought that up last night. During Governor Scott's
he brought that up?
His budget address. Did you say this to
I
me?
did not see that.
No, so actually he did not bring it up because it was not included in his budget.
Okay. Like, we're not doing it.
Yeah, and there was so much stuff like that that they didn't even notice, the Democrats, whatever, the left, didn't even notice that until this morning.
Oh, interesting.
Later
and then
today,
it came
they
out.
didn't even notice it. Yeah.
Okay.
So then somebody finally did, like, hey, where's the money for the free school lunches?
And that all needs to be looked at. I mean, these are all places that we could get money for the state to help with the things that we need.
So I pulled up here just so you know what I have. I have Workday pulled up, the AI platform for HR and finance. Workday is the only platform that unites HR and finance to keep business moving forward. Are you ready to be to fundamentally transform how you manage your people and money? Because we are. So the state of Vermont is currently using this for the education sector to keep track of payments.
Is that, I don't know for
I'm
certain.
pretty sure. I mean, I'm pretty sure what this is. It's like they help people track and anyone out there that's listening, if you're listening and you use Workday for any reason and you could give a brief description, please feel free to do so. But my understanding is it is like used to track like paid time off and medical leave and your hourly wages and just like all of those things conglomerated into AI software, or just a piece of software online that they're able to.
That's AI driven.
And I think that's what's that's probably the point of what they're trying to do in the state.
Oh yeah, they were trying to go down that road, but then a lot of people were actually saying, there were definitely people who were saying, there's nothing wrong with our system now. Why do we need to upgrade that to that? It's costing so much money. And then that's where you saw like there were concerns of people in Oregon who were not getting paid because there were glitches. There's other states that have pulled out of the contracts because of issues with it. And again, I just feel like she's really trying to shine light on this needs to be addressed. And if we're looking at affordability, these are the places that we obviously can look. Like, that's a big deal. We're talking over $100 million, that needs to be addressed.
Jerry Zeller writes, it's eliminating jobs. So I could see where that maybe would come in.
Right.
Is that such a bad thing in the state of Vermont with an education system that's really top heavy on administration? People always, let me just be clear, people always say that.
Right.
I'm not saying that.
Right. But that's the argument.
That is the argument.
Right.
I'm just, but he writes HR will be non-existent.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look.
It's a super good point.
That's
where, like, can we keep it about humans? Sure. And I always come back to that place
human
of, like,
resources.
Can we keep it about the human part versus, AI taking over all the jobs?
Yeah.
And that's where you get into the transhumanism thing. And you see there's efficiency, but it's also totally hackable. And who's running it? Yeah. And we're dependent. And how much does it cost? Can you go back from it? Can you turn back around from it once you go down that road? I mean, these are all the ethics that these conversations need to be on the table, right? But a lot of times this doesn't get talked about. It's just like, boom, it's happening.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Just to say it plainly, because you look at the state right now, and there's totally an attack. I mean, I shouldn't say attack, but you know a lot more about this than I do. But there's an attack on private schools. There's an attack on homeschooling. And I say attack as just a verb. Maybe that's not the right word.
Yep.
But there seems to be a pressure to implement some type of like universal school program, 5 school districts, all this different stuff.
I know.
And I mean, this might be a good point just to like quickly reference Rice Academy, who is now advertising with Vermont Daily Chronicle. They're a Catholic school, private school up in Chittenden County.
Okay.
And their high school, I think it's just high school, might be middle and high school. And they're like really starting to get out there on the digital front to advertise their
I saw that.
Yeah,
on
and
BBC,
that's one of the things that they've done is they've supported us, which hey, like we're all for it. Thank you very much. It makes a big difference as always.
Right.
But I guess where I'm going with this is, how do we, and I'm asking you, because I'm sure you think about this, how do we create a new school system that keeps all of this in mind? Like the AI, HR, all this stuff with the school system, how much is it going to cost? Without losing touch with our community.
Right.
So like 5 school boards seems crazy. I mean, I don't have an opinion on it. It's just, to me, my initial thought is, that's kind of a radical change.
Can I share something with you on that?
Absolutely.
So I called John McClowery, who obviously 40 decades plus of amazing experience and research, and senator and vice chair on Senate Education. And he has watched the trajectory over the decades of this whole sort of school situation play out. And his whole thing is, if we go to that, and again, I don't know where I land on it either. Obviously, we know something needs to shift. But his whole thing was, if we go to that situation, initially maybe it's going to be good and we'll get rid of some of the extra people and that sort of thing, but then he just thinks the bureaucracy is going to grow again and they'll be so much farther away from you. They won't be sort of in your local space.
That's exactly what's going to happen.
I know. And that's what he sort of had gone back to on that. And the other thing I want to say is Mike Taglavia, Representative Taglavia from Corinth, Orange, he's on House Committee on Environment. He reintroduced the school choice bill, so it's now H89, and that's an amazing bill. And I have to say, I come back to that. I feel like it's got to be for the kids. Yeah. You let them decide. We know none of us want to see our public institutions fall apart at all.
No.
And there's got to be a way. I think most people, they live in a community. Most people want their kids to go to the community school. If they're not performing well, then why would they send them there, right? If it's not a good match for them, then they could find a different thing. So I feel like there's issues that need to be worked out there, but I land in the same place, and I was so happy to see Representative Taglavia reintroduce that bill so it can be part of this conversation as we're figuring out what's school finance going to look like. How is that going to play out? How can we save money? How can we get better performance? So people feel very differently about it.
Here's a question for you. Does Jeff Bezos have anything to do with data mining and data harvesting and Amazon as a whole?
Well, that came up when you and I spoke last time,
Yeah.
when we were talking about Zoe Saunders and her experience.
That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah, so that's where you get into the sort of private aspect, the private school issue. And if you have these investors saying, hey, we're going to give you money for these Bezos academies, and in exchange,
You're gonna give us
essentially your children become a data commodity.
Yep.
And some people will be like, fine, I want them to have a great education. I don't care about the data, whatever. I don't have anything to hide. Some people will say that, and other people will say, no way. And that's where it's like, how do you hold on to these public institutions, that serve Vermont and serve our communities? And we want to, this is the $1 million, $1 billion question.
So that's what I'm kind of getting at, though. Is that what they're trying to implement? Is some sort of like public school system where you're just better off going into a private school and just paying the price?
I hope that we just.
I'm not even saying I oppose that either.
No, I hear
I'm
you.
just saying. Like, I'm trying to figure it out.
I know, I hear you, and those are the biggest questions. But I think the biggest thing that we want to be careful of is that public-private partnership. Like, we should have enough money with tax collection, to be able to maintain and have these schools that offer our kids these, the math, the English, the stuff we can all agree on.
I agree.
So.
Yeah, just how do we get there while keeping those costs in mind? And I think everybody, it is the multi-million-dollar question.
It really
and I don't know
is.
the answer to it.
I know.
I'm not convinced that this 5-district thing is going to work.
I know.
Maybe people before.
I was talking to Senator
I've been wrong
Beck.
before, but I just don't see how that's going to work. But
right. And
I need to find out more about it. Maybe.
I was talking to Senator Beck about it, and he was like, who knows? We're just starting the conversation.
That's right.
Maybe it'll be 8, maybe it will be 12, who knows? But I think the biggest thing, and this is where I go back to, I love what Senator Beck specifically said about we need to reconnect communities with their spending, because the system that we have right now, they can spend, and if they are a receiving town, the rest of Vermont's covering it. So then people overspend, and we've ended up in this tough situation.
They've lost connection to it. Like, if their funding is being tied to the legislature and you're paying for the schooling of kids up in Burlington per pupil where it costs way more,
right.
That seems to be a problem for a lot of folks.
Right.
I think that's a really good point. It probably isn't going to actually be 5.
I know.
I'm sure that they have a plan for there to be 20, but the 5 is like, oh, well, we'll compromise for 20.
I know. And that's where
because what is it, like 300 right now, school boards?
I don't know what it was. I think it was just over 100. Oh, I don't know.
I'll find out. I'll find out. Just
I did hear the number recently, but I don't know. But so, so anyway, that was a part of the thing, the PFAS thing, the Green Mountain Care Board. Because that's the other thing, the healthcare thing. Right now, again, a major rumbling in the State House, and again, just like the PFAS, it's totally nonpartisan, is the Green Mountain Care Board has to go. And right now, we are the only state who has that broad level of regulatory authority given to the Green Mountain Care Board. And so many of the hospitals are struggling with what they're doing and what the path is right now. And I listened in Senate Health and Welfare to the chair of the Green Mountain Care Board present, and his whole piece, they are looking for more money. They are looking for more numbers. They're going to try, it seems like, to go with the AHEAD model for the hospitals. We know that our hospitals, many are at risk. We know that healthcare costs are on the rise. And here we have the Green Mountain Care Board specifically saying we want to bloat our bureaucracy, we need more numbers, and we need more money. And it's our hospitals who pay for that. So then we have money going away from the hospitals, away from the communities, away from the patients, into the Green Mountain Care Board to regulate, when most of the hospitals believe that and the people and the legislators, from all the conversations I'm having, that the Green Mountain Care Board has totally failed. Since 2011, they have, it seems like, completely failed in trying to get accessibility, affordability, and sustainability of hospitals. And then that report just came out, and that's where it's like, oh, we're going to be looking at, these 4 hospitals are in dire straits, maybe 8 hospitals in dire straits. So again, is that just going to push people to the telehealth piece? Are we going to lose, those
connection.
Institutions, lose connection, lose the institutions?
Well, and that maybe is where the whole Make America Healthy Again thing will come in.
With the Kennedy
and I really do think that the way that we think about healthcare, like right now, I turned 25 in July, and I turned 26 coming up in July.
Okay.
And my girlfriend, she just turned 26. So, like, healthcare is serious problem for us
Oh,
right
yeah,
now. We're like,
exactly.
okay, wait a minute. But I just don't foresee the system nationally, even that we have upholding, right? Like, do I look towards the end of my life and say, oh, good thing I'm going to have Medicare?
Right.
No, because I'm not even sure that what exists today as Medicare will still be
Right.
the same thing by that time.
Right.
So like for me, I'm looking at it like okay, we need to, like, in the whole state, not just in the whole state of Vermont, we need to radically change the healthcare system where
know.
we're not dependent upon the major pharmaceutical drug companies, right, for just basic health, right? Like people these days are on pills and drugs for things they do not need to be on pills and drugs
Right,
for.
right.
You know, the whole COVID scare that scared the crap out of everybody. I think there was two purposes for that. One of them was to really, scare the hell out of everybody. But I think ultimately, I believe God has a double-edged sword for many different things. I think it forced a lot of us to start thinking about health,
Our health.
a lot differently, and what health actually means. So like, you know as well as I do, none of our government officials during that time were saying, hey, get out and get fresh air and go for a hike and, eat some
Vitamin D.
Yeah, eat
Right.
some oranges maybe or whatever. I'm just
And
joking
we
around.
knew that comorbidities, diabetes, high
Exactly.
blood pressure, obesity put someone
Huge
much
part.
more at risk. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I have family that were constantly upset with me, blasting me, saying things like, I have this blah 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 disease, and I felt like pushing back, and I didn't, but I felt like pushing back at that time, like, why don't we get that problem figured out? Why don't we get
Right.
that health problem that
Right.
you're talking about
And
situated?
I will say, easier said than
It
done.
is.
As a nutritionist, it's so tough, and
know,
that's where it's like,
I know.
in an
Yeah.
ideal world, that's what we hope for and what we want. But
Of course.
we all have our, it's so
I do
tough.
too.
Yeah,
I have my
know.
own health choices that I make
Right.
that I probably could say, like you saw me drinking a Coca-Cola the other day.
Right.
I'm not a perfect
None of us
individual.
are.
None of us are. We all do things we're not supposed to do and eat things we're not supposed to,
Right.
etc. But the point that I'm trying to make, it's like, okay, at broader scale, if you were to look at my diet every single day, a Coke a week isn't going to destroy me and make
Right.
me have diabetes.
Right.
Maybe it will. I don't know.
Right.
But I'm saying it probably isn't. And as a whole, we're not looking at health. I think we are now, and I hope, I don't know, I haven't gotten word today yet on RFK Jr., but
Right.
my hope is that now, instead of talking about health from the perspective of, OMG, I'm going to have this problem, how am I going to pay for it? Instead of thinking it like that, we're thinking about, oh, well, I am making preventative choices and measures in my life every single day that will prevent me from having diabetes when I turn 50 years old,
Right.
from having cancer when I'm 75, or whatever the situation is. Like, I'm not going to smoke cigarettes. I'm not going to eat crap all day, every day.
Right.
I'm going to exercise, right? So as a healthcare as an institution within the hospitals, and it's so funny how the churches connect, because a lot of these hospitals were hand in hand with the church, even created through the Catholic Church specifically,
Yeah.
like here in Vermont, right? There was they were responsible for a lot of this kind of stuff. So like, there's going to be a huge vacuum
Oh, yeah.
coming up, and it already is there, but it's coming up, and I think how we fix it is by taking it into our own hands. People like you, who's a nutritionist, myself, who, I'm not a nutritionist, but I definitely know how to take care of my health, and I can help others. I think that's what's going to happen, is we're just going to have to figure out, okay, so we're not really going to be as dependent upon the system. And to the folks out there wondering, if I break my arm or I break my leg or I need surgery,
Right.
I do not know the answer to that
Right,
question,
I
and I'm
know.
not going to sit here and pretend that I do. But I do know we have to start thinking about health completely different.
Right.
We can't depend on the systems, institutions that have existed for, the greater half of the last 60 years. Post World War II,
Right.
things have been great in many respects, but it's also now what we're finding ourselves with is like this dying world of the past. It's just seems like it's so obvious that it's going by the wayside.
And it's also tricky, if you don't mind me saying, like, I feel that so many people have been lied to from a
Yes.
health standpoint. When people were told fat is bad, in the 1970s, that was the most dangerous message that people could have ever been given by their government or by the scientists. Because then what did they do? They ate more carbs, and then obesity and insulin resistance and diabetes, because fat got a bad rap. And you look at, like, honestly, this is what is so insane to me. So 1908, hydrogenated oils, partially hydrogenated oils hit the market in Crisco, right?
Sure.
There was a lipid biochemist studying fats, Fred Kumerow, and He literally had all the research, and he was like, hey, FDA, look, this stuff is causing heart disease, heart attacks. It's so dangerous. Get it out, get it out, get it out. This was like 1960, so he had it in there for like 50 years or so. He had to sue the FDA for them to actually take action. So it took over 100 years for trans fats, partially hydrogenated oils, causing heart disease, cancer, and inflammation to finally get out of our food supply.
And what year was that when that?
It was like a few-year process, and it's literally in just the past few years that they're like, oh, we should probably try to clean this up.
Get your trans fat out of food.
2017, 2019, more than 100 years. So people have had such bad information.
Oh, for so long.
Not that you should be trusting the government for your health information,
you would
but
hope that you
people look
could.
to authorities. People look to that.
By nature, we are religious, and
know.
that's in that sense.
And think that people have our best interests in mind.
We do. Well,
Right.
we do believe that, and we're taught to believe that a
Right.
lot of the times. Even
Right.
once again within the institutional structures, whether it's the public school industry, public school system, or the medical industry, or the churches, or like whatever it is. Like we
Right.
put our trust and faith in these people,
Right.
and I think that is why RFK, in my opinion, his appointment is symbolic of the end of a dying era and a rebirth. Hopefully, look, we've talked a little bit about some of the AI stuff and Nicole Shanahan and all
Right,
that, but
right.
hopefully a rebirth of true academic,
Yeah.
an academic society.
Yeah.
Not one that's just based upon money and publish or perish, and just like getting money out of these research projects, whatever they are,
He
and
has
then getting
been fighting
he has
so hard.
his whole life.
Right.
And I think when you once again you could go back to that time post World War II. Well, that's the exact time when we were living in very prosperous times, but that's the exact time that our JFK, the original, was shot. There's a reason why. He knew that this was coming. He was somebody also who believed in public health
Right.
and advocated very, very much for it.
Right.
Public health was very strong at that time, and same with his father, but not quite as intensely. But his father, of course, assassinated as well. And since then, I feel like, you could say, Paul, no, you're wrong, but I feel like this whole world has been slowly subdued into like this weird sleep, and we're finally, humans are waking up.
Right.
Yeah.
And really, I think we've always been seeking truth, but now again, through some technology, we have more means and abilities to connect and seek that truth for sure. And I would say with RFK, I think the biggest thing that I appreciate about him is his rigor in his research, 100%. Yeah. He seems like he has high ethics, morals. But the other big thing is the conflict of interest in the corporate capture of the agencies. He has been on top of that and look at this revolving door happening between the industry that these agencies are supposed to regulate. And that has been going on within the EPA, within the USDA, within the FDA, and we're not getting that good regulation to keep foods clean and to keep the environment safe, et cetera. And he's been on that. And he has called out Big Pharma amazingly when it comes to their criminals. They're convicted criminals for multiple charges. Like, it's just insane. And he came, when did he come? I think he came to Vermont 2014 to testify.
Well, yeah, he came to the Vermont State House to
Yes.
testify. Yeah,
Yep.
he also was here in 2023 and spoke at the Ethan Allen Institute.
Yes, that's right.
So
that
he's
was great.
actually, and I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to, show anyone's their hands here, but like John Clark, he's been working pretty closely with Joe Salatin, who is working very closely with Robert Kennedy Jr.
Yep.
And I think Salatin might even be
Coming
given
in.
like FDA, or I'm not sure. I don't know.
I know it was
I'm not,
tossed around.
I'm not gonna
Right.
put it out there, but
Right.
the point is like there are some huge Vermont connections to Robert Kennedy Jr. And a lot of people support him,
Yeah.
and a lot of people want to see good things come from him. That
Right.
includes myself.
Right.
And I put this out there, the reason I'm talking about it, and it's like, I'm curious to know from Vermonters' perspectives and from our own, it's like, if this does go through, like, how are we going to change? If he gets in there, how is it going to change Vermont subsequently? And how do we implement it? And I didn't quite get it when I first heard, okay, RFK Jr. is going to be maybe HHS, which, like, the head of HHS, to me that was like, oh, I thought CIA or whatever. I'm now realizing why it's so important for him to be in that position, because
Right.
there is so much of academia that revolves around health and human services.
Right.
And health and human services, our environment is affected by these same exact, it's
Oh,
the
yeah.
medical industry, big agricultural companies,
tied.
all of these things. And I think that for so long, again, the idea has been, publish or perish. We need to have our research get through so that we can continue to get grants, and we don't really want to prove our ideas wrong because then we won't continue to get grants.
Right.
Like, we need somebody who's going to come in there and start to go to bat for us. But I'm just so curious, like, how is this going to affect Vermont?
I know. Well, I think there's also going to be a lot of pushback because of the messaging around him, and you're anti-vaxxer, and you're going to take away the vaccines and all of that sort of stuff, whereas he's just like, we need to look at this. We need to look at autism, we need to look at mercury, we need to look at aluminum, we need to look at why do the pharmaceutical companies have complete liability from their vaccine products when no other product ever has that liability. So if a vaccine causes damage, those producers, those pharmaceutical companies are absolutely not responsible. Like, that's a bad law. That was 1986.
It's
that
crazy.
Needs to be gone.
It's totally crazy that they
Needs to
ever
be
allowed
gone.
that to become a thing.
Right.
And one of the things he was being pressed about today in this hearing was Elizabeth Warren was just like, who is totally, by the way, like, all of the NIH research and all the, she was, I'll leave it at that because I'm not an expert on it, but she's been part of a lot of this stuff. Point is, she was grilling him like, when you're head of HHS, will you promise that you will not financially benefit for the lawsuits against vaccine companies? And he said, no, I'm not going to.
Right.
And I don't blame him because ultimately he's going to be getting sued all the time.
I know.
He needs the money.
Right.
They don't understand it. It's not like, another point just to make too, and I think that what we're talking about is a much bigger issue.
Oh, yeah.
People don't want these problems to go away.
I know.
There's a lot of money in these problems, but God, it just makes me just see everything so clear as day when you see people like Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, and like Bernie Sanders was up there, showing, going after him, just ripping him apart, showing the Children's Health Defense website, where they had onesies for sale for babies to say like unvaxxed, unaffected. That's what it said, and it's just like stupid. And he's like, will you be making money off this and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, I don't work for the Children's Health Defense. I removed myself from it for this very reason.
Right.
And,
I'll leave it at that. It's changing of the guard, isn't it? It's the changing of the guard.
They are losing it. They're losing it. And I guess what I'm saying, though, is like, and that goes for everybody in the State House. It goes for me. It goes for you. The things in my life that I probably should be letting go of, maybe I could be letting go of, and the problems that I define myself with, and like, I'm just like holding on to all these things because it's what gives me purpose. But it's like, imagine if we all just let go, and what does that look like? Right. And I'm really trying to speak to something bigger here because I struggle with this, and I can see myself in Bernie Sanders. Right. I can see myself in these people. Right.
And I think it's also just such an educational experience that we're all going through. We all always have a lot to learn, but there's so much more information coming out that we're trying to process and understand, like, what is the truth around that? And that's a struggle right now for a lot of people because of, as we know, the flood of all this information. But I think that also brings me to the point of Bill number 60 at Vermont State House, Bill 61 and Bill 69, I think it is, that Mark Higley, again, put back in. I think it's the 8th year that these bills have been put back in, and these are all about informed consent, body autonomy. I'm going to make my own decisions for my body. And also the other bill, there won't be any discrimination based on vaccination status. And so this is the first year that we have more supporters. Yeah. There's more people signing on to these bills, especially because of injuries to the COVID vaccines. I've talked to some representatives who have had family members with injury. And people have to realize injury is real. Vaccine injury is real. And when I talk about it sometimes, I'm like, literally, you are playing Russian roulette. Are you going to be good to go, or are you not going to be good to go? Are you going to be the one that gets the reaction? Yeah. And it's such a personal choice. And that's all these bills are doing in the State House right now. They are saying, this is your choice. You make that decision. Your body, your choice, same thing. And so I was just so happy to see more people sign on to those. A lot of new reps coming in, their bravery to sign on to those, and not caring like, oh, they might be pegged this or pegged that. They're like, this is just right. This is what needs to happen. At our legislative breakfast in St. Johnsbury Monday morning, Greg Burt, my rep, and then also Deb Powers, who took Bobby Farley's Rubio seat, it's Waterford, Reigate, Barnet, they had signed on to those bills, and a man stood up, a young man, and he grilled them. He grilled them on why they stood, why they signed on to those bills, and it was beautiful. They were so calm, and they were so just very, this is a parent's choice. This is a parent's choice. This is a person's choice. There's, what else can you say to that when we know that there's real benefit risk with all of these? I mean, think about 2014, Nicole Matten from Barton, Vermont, testified when we were getting rid of philosophical exemption. In this state, we have religious exemption. Philosophical exemption is gone right now. But she lost her 7-year-old daughter to a flu vaccine 36 hours after she got it. The death certificate said myocarditis and flu vaccine. The flu vaccine, from what I recall, was Fluzone, which had mercury in it, and she died from myocarditis.
This was in Vermont.
This was in Vermont.
Yeah.
And this is where we have to acknowledge that these are, like any pharmaceutical, like any procedure, they bring risk. People die, people get damaged. I can't even tell you how many people I work with in my practice right now who have Bell's palsy because of the COVID vaccines, who've had Guillain-Barré syndrome, have new autoimmune conditions. And so I think people just really need to recognize this is real. We're injecting foreign proteins and substances into people's body. And so I was just so happy to see those bills come in. I wanted to, and did you know about the thing that happened in Dartmouth?
No.
That was a really big one, about the person who was trying to get a kidney transplant at the hospital, and they were denying them a kidney transplant because they wouldn't get a COVID vaccine. And in their patient Bill of Rights, and this is another bill that I've been working on with my rep, but in their patient Bill of Rights in New Hampshire, it specifically says a person cannot be denied care or services based on vaccination status. And the Attorney General in New Hampshire said to Dartmouth, here's the patient Bill of Rights. We're going to basically threaten you with a lawsuit. So the person was able to get a kidney transplant, literally save their life.
Wow.
So I'm trying to get that plugged into
Holy
our
cow.
Vermont. We don't have it in the Vermont Bill of Rights right now. So that was one other topic that I wanted to talk about because they're the tough topics, but it's what we need to be talking about.
Absolutely.
And then the other last thing I think that is so important is
Very tough topics.
they are. The Climate Council has to go.
Oh,
That's the other
absolutely.
thing.
Yeah.
They absolutely have to go. We have an Office of the Climate. We've had the Climate Council. They're totally redundant. They're stepping on each other's toes. They're doing similar work. They're clashing or maybe getting along. I saw them clash last year, but it's a nightmare. And with the Climate Council right now, the way that it's set up is they break into subcommittees to do their work, but then the subcommittees break into task force groups, and those are not open to the public. So this is how they do all this work. The public cannot see that. It's not an open process. And then they bring their findings to the subcommittee, and then it goes to the Climate Council. So we have the Climate Action Plan coming out of the Climate Council. We've got the Comprehensive Energy Plan coming out of the Agency of Natural Resources. And it's just incredibly redundant and repetitive. And obviously, as we know, when June Tierney just retired from the Department of Public Service and she was leaving the Climate Council, she let them know, I think what we're doing is really dangerous. I'm paraphrasing. The quote is at Vermont Daily Chronicle. But I think what we're doing is really dangerous. This is not the right path. We need to be focused on resiliency and infrastructure and helping people, like the real world impacts, where they're still chasing carbon.
Yeah.
And until I'm sorry, last thing.
No.
They're going to be chasing carbon until we deal with the Global Warming Solutions Act. And that is not going to serve Vermont. It doesn't help our roads. It doesn't help any Vermonters. It doesn't help our farmlands, our bridges, our rivers. And that's where it's getting back into the real world versus playing the carbon game. Because who wants us to play the carbon game? Wall Street,
Yeah, of course.
Elon Musk, whoever's making money on the carbon
Whoever's
credits.
got the credits.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's there's so many things you could draw to that whole climate act. But like once again, we're assuming that carbon is the problem.
I know.
Nobody wants to talk about weather modification and geoengineering.
We have to get into that.
I understand. Listen, I understand. I've had a lot of pushback for a long time on this subject.
You've been at it for a while.
I've been at it since I graduated college.
Right.
I kept my mouth shut for a couple of years, for about a year about it when I ran for state senate. I stopped talking about it.
Right.
But if people asked me about it, I would let them know what I really thought.
Go there.
But for the most part, I just kind of shut my mouth, which was very hard to do. But I went with it. But over time, it's been increasingly difficult because it's so in your face obvious. I mean, look, I'm not necessarily saying that the floods 2 years in a row were caused by geoengineering weather modification, but there's definitely questions that need to be asked about it.
We have to look.
And I asked the governor about it the day after or 2 days after at his press conference he hosted, and he said, "Okay, well, it is what it is. We're climate change is real, and we're going to build back better, and all this different stuff, like the words that are,
I
you
know,
know, and
I
it's
know.
whatever the words are, and that's fine. I get it.
And I will say
his
it's a
job
tough
is,
place
yeah,
because look at this, the Vermont mentalities are like,
yeah, he's
Yeah.
the governor of Vermont. Like
Right.
he represents these people, whether or not he thinks something's going on or not,
Right.
doesn't matter because
Right.
that's not the point.
like trying to respect
I,
that.
I understand that. I
Right.
really do. And we've received some pushback at the Chronicle. I've received pushback in person from people on it, but I'm going to stand firm on my point. Like, this isn't going anywhere. And as I get older, I fully expect to be involved in this conversation because it's going to be more and more in your face. You have a lot of this, like, you know, you have these studies here with you, that you're sitting here in front of you.
Oh, yeah.
From the Biden administration, 2 of them talking about weather modification and geoengineering.
Right.
And it's like, okay, so where's this? What is this? What are you guys talking about?
Right.
How long has this been going on?
And
You
it's
know?
so tough when people deny, like Representative Campbell over in St. Johnsbury, because I'll write about some of this stuff in our local paper, the Caledonia Record. And obviously some gets published at Vermont Daily Chronicle too. But Representative Campbell wrote back to one of my pieces and he was talking about conspiracy theory.
Yes, of
theory.
course.
So now I'm going to meet with him and he's supposed to meet with me on Friday. And I just want to be like, you need to recognize when our legislators have such a closed mind that they can't think or consider something like this, we're in danger.
Yeah.
That endangers us. We have to be able to say, this is real, let's talk about it and figure out what we could do.
What do you think it is that stops people from going there? Because
Mainstream media?
Do you think that's it though?
Well,
because
I
don't even think always, like same with Governor Scott, same with like, I don't even think a lot of the time it's like they benefit financially or like, I literally just think it's like,
No.
I don't really even, it's like
I
we
think
exist
that
in
there's
this
like,
weird world.
There's this place in Vermont where I think a lot of what the Republicans really just came in on too was these real issues of affordability. I should not have to move. I should be able to afford to pay my taxes. So they're dealing with this like
Bigger
real world,
problem.
kind of like more imminent threat. Like not that geoengineering isn't an imminent, but we have more control over these pieces.
It's kind of the same as the
money,
climate.
the funding, the education, the healthcare, like, you know, and again, when I heard Scott Beck, I was so impressed when he was just like, you know, how much do we want to see the heating fuel go up? And it was like none, zero.
Yeah, I thought that was to his credit.
It was
awesome.
awesome.
Incredible.
Right.
And we did just publish an article about it today. I mean, I put it up. Basically, the GOP says like no to,
I saw
to
that.
any,
I
to
saw
any
that.
new, and I think that's great. And we did a little bit of a breakdown
So
of some of
good.
the stuff that they're.
But I also
but
wanna,
it's just
like-
like where.
sorry.
No, it's fine. I just the question that remains for me is like, okay, so this is your stance.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get real about the whole climate change narrative because with this new administration, and I think that the way things are going, geoengineering is going to be part of this, but like all of the subsequent connections drawing us back to transhumanism and AI at the start of our conversation, it's like we can't just pretend like I said this when I ran for state senate a lot. If people ever did ask me my stance on like trans issues, I'd always say like, listen, trans issues are just one thing. I got concerns about that, but where we're going, trans issues, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Right, I know.
It's going to get real weird.
And that's where it's like humanity has to sort of get the information and help steer the path. Like we have.
We don't have to go that way.
No, and we have the tech and tools, but that's where you go back to that book, Ivan Illich, Tools of Conviviality. How do we use the tools and make sure that the tools aren't using us? How do we sort of put them in their place and use them and hang on to humanity through this whole process? And I think that's what we're contending with. But back to the Republican thing, I just want to say that I feel like they are literally dealing with, you know, that imminent threat of how do Vermonters afford to live? Like that basic thing.
No,
and then we have
scary
all
out
these
there.
other pieces. But the thing that's tricky is when they start going down that climate road, it's like you have to start talking about this geoengineering because it's so tied in. And when people keep saying, when you hear Bernie Sanders and Peter Welch taking all this sort of crazy extreme action around quote unquote climate change, and it's like you can't go there unless you go here.
No.
Because then we're going to end up off the cliff.
That's what I mean. It's like you can't base your, if you're still operating within the framework that climate change is real and it's caused by carbon emissions, then you're never ever going to be able to get past this problem. You're just going to continually, every few years, we're going to talk about this, that, and the other thing, but they're always going to come back with the same argument. So you need to start dismantling this idea, calling it out for what it is, and stop being afraid to do it. I understand it's scary.
Right.
you're talking to somebody who literally was in college at one of the most environmentally, I was going to say environmentally sound, one of the most environmentally minded schools in the nation, in the world.
Right.
But I said, no.
I know.
I don't think climate change is real. And I still came out saying, like, this is what I think it is. It's not like I'm just saying it's nothing. No, I have an explanation. So I'm just calling on the VTGOP, like, look, I know you guys really don't like it when I talk about this stuff, but it's not going anywhere.
I know.
And neither am I.
I know. And that's where I think it's such an important point, because, again, it's like so many times they want to bring us to this metric. This carbon is a metric, so it can be used and it can be utilized.
Comes back to the economy.
Environment is so much more than just carbon. And the other thing that I think is where humanity gets sort of a lot of times arrogant and conceited, we have to do something about this carbon, versus thinking about like all the mycorrhizae, all the networks in the forest. You think of all the plants. That mycorrhizae is infinite and can continue to grow and sequester any sort of, if there's an imbalance in our atmosphere, doesn't the Earth have the ability to handle that? They've been dealing with carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, all the building blocks of life forever. They've been building, and that's where I go back to, like pollutants. Let's talk about the pollutants, right? Let's talk about what's being sprayed. Let's talk about radiation. Let's talk about PFAS. Let's talk about that stuff. But otherwise, it's like the Earth is equipped more than we would ever understand.
We can't even comprehend what we're trying to
deal with the balance of these elements of life. I mean, it's been doing it for, I'm not even going to put a number, I have no idea. It's been doing it for millennia.
For always has been and always will be, as far as theology might go.
But it's like, I don't know how to shift. Like I'm a lot of times talking to, like, say, Laura Sibilia, House Committee on Energy and Digital Infrastructure. It's like, how do you get someone to sort of shift away from this carbon thing when for years the mainstream media has fed them this, their education has fed them this, the legislature has, and the reports and the studies, et cetera. And I will say, in that committee, I saw Jared Duvall, and he was sitting there and he was testifying, as Energy Action Network, who he heads, executive director. But then he put on his Climate Council hat, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, he's got the best research, he's got great research. And I'm like, and I wrote them a letter to the committee, and I was like, do you understand what's going on with his research here? Like, he is representing the renewable energy special interest, and here he is testifying to the committee about all his studies. Are they questioning his studies? Are they questioning how he used and interpreted the data? So, it's, and then he puts on his Climate Council hat, so then it's like, I'm your advisor as the Climate Council, and now I'm your lobbyist, even though I'm unregistered lobbyist as Energy Action Network.
In this moment.
And it's so tough because, again, you'll hear legislators say they get a lot of good information from the lobbyists, and it's true. But a lot of times they have to filter that information and those studies and those reports, and also listen to the people.
Their constituents,
which we saw was completely ignored during the Clean Heat Standard.
Oh, well, of course.
But don't get me started.
And look at what happens when you do that. But I think, like, I've dealt with this a little bit, like just with family and friends and like different in work. Obviously, the State House is like, okay, Paul. So if you don't think it's climate change, and you think it's geoengineering, and you think so, if that wasn't going on, the planet would just be fine and everything would just be okay. And I think, I do, and I really do believe that. I really do believe that. Carbon emissions, carbon specifically in a gas form, is actually good for the planet.
Right.
And that's like total countercultural.
I know.
I'm like I'm like literally a radical by saying that. And by the way, I'm not advocating for drill baby drill. I think there's something to be said about environmental degradation on our landscape. And I'm not advocating for us to start just drilling for oil and doing all these different. No, that's not what I'm saying.
I know.
And the fact that people get excited about it almost in this like erotic
but
way,
it's also,
drill baby
I have
drill.
To say,
like,
does it even make sense to have that argument in Vermont when carbon is not even our issue?
No, we don't even
so
have it.
So even if someone believed
it doesn't matter.
It's like, and you know what Wisconsin did? Wisconsin has a recent bill called Make Carbon Great Again.
Oh.
I have not read the bill.
Wow.
I don't know the whole sort of thing.
Pretty funny.
It's pretty classic.
Well, and that's the reality is, like, we're a carbon-based species, by the way.
Carbon is life.
Carbon is life.
Carbon
and I think
life.
they have really... it comes back to, like, really the fall of man. We define ourselves by these problems that are self-created, and we want to latch ourselves to them because it gives us meaning, it gives us hope, it gives us, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. And I'm speaking this to you like out loud because I almost think myself personally, I've lost touch with this in myself, right? Like I've become attached to some of the ideas and some of the things that I care about. But at the end of the day, it's like, man, like if you just like take a step back and like let go and stop trying to tweet about it all the time and stop trying to write this story. I gotta make this video. I gotta do this crazy plot. No, wait a minute, dude. Like just let it all go.
Right.
Let God handle it, because the reality is there's a reason why everything's happening.
Right.
And it's not really on me and you,
right.
other than to do what we're doing.
Exactly.
You know?
And then I will say on top of that, though, what blows my mind is, because I was never involved in politics. I was like living my life, homestead and homeschool and doing my thing, etc. And then as soon as the COVID thing happened, obviously that launched me in, and I was like, no way. Because then you start seeing what the lawmakers think they can do or try to do, and it's like, do you know how that's gonna like
they don't
affect me?
I don't think they did.
And I think that's unfortunately what then activates people. But people should be able to just sort of live their life and do their thing and be with their family and friends and work and know that the people in there are doing right by them. And I think they think they're doing right by them, but what we've just seen with Global Warming Solutions Act, Clean Heat Standard, the property tax, like that's not helping.
They think they're doing right by them.
They
too.
do. I'll
and
give them
that's
that.
the other thing that really needs to be understood is like they do think that they're doing right by their constituents.
They do.
And I'm not saying that they're dumb, but they're so somebody actually just wrote this in as a comment. I think it was Vermonster, or maybe it was Jerry Zeller, because we were talking about AI and it's like keeping up. We got to keep up with AI. We got to keep up with And somebody wrote, well, most people can barely keep up with one thing.
Exactly.
Nobody has the time to care about all this.
And we
crap.
just want to live our lives
and we just
be
want
with
to live our
family
lives.
and friends
Yes,
and enjoy and have fun. And it's tough when we have this stuff. Like I just wonder if there wasn't such a massive sort of pushback on Clean Heat Standard and affordability and property tax, would there have been change? Maybe. Maybe there would have been change. I have no idea. Would it have just happened because everything's supposed to happen as it is, or did it take the people to do that? And I know this is like a big philosophical question.
No, but it's a fine. I think I really enjoy this because I think about it all the time.
Right.
Right. Like I think about this all the time. Here's another really great question. Trump lost in 2020, whether or not he lost or not. I personally think the election was stolen and they cheated.
Right.
I'm going to say it out on the record.
I haven't dove down that rabbit hole enough.
I have enough, and I don't really want to go any further because it's pretty obvious to me. And the thing is like I don't want to be the guy who's like, that's not my thing. Geoengineering is my thing.
Right, I know.
That's not my thing. I think the election, but so whatever, whether it was or wasn't.
Right.
Okay. And we've talked a little bit about some of the issues we might have with the current new administration, the Trump administration. But without that happening, him losing, would we have now had RFK come along this year and find himself in the position that he has? Like it's all the more, like the magnitude of it now is so much more. And would that, if say Trump got in and then in 2022, maybe the election, who knows? You can look at it however you want. But the point is like there's a redemptive purpose for the election being stolen. Even in the state of Vermont, where things have gone so far to the left, where people are like, okay, let's go back the other way a little bit. I mean, it was making headlines all over the country. And that was amazing.
I saw that in the New York Times, et cetera, and they were like, okay, they voted for Kamala, but they voted Republican locally.
And big time. And that has a lot to do with Governor Scott, and to his credit, you know, thank you, Governor Scott.
Yes,
you know,
and Vermont Daily Chronicle.
And I think Vermont Daily Chronicle had something to do with that.
Definitely,
But
people rallied.
But I think people rallied, and I think people they felt the weight of their property taxes, and they basically said, okay, now I can't send my kid to. This is a privileged response, but I think there's a lot of folks out there who make pretty good money who are like, wait, I can't send my kid to summer camp for whatever, tennis or whatever. And now I gotta take care, I'm just joking around, but it's like they felt the weight of it. Even people that maybe insulated from a lot of this stuff, you think, but they weren't this time.
Well, I'll put two other thoughts out there, and this is something that I do think about. I've never really verbalized it, so hopefully it will come out okay. But we have this two-party system, and I think the question is how do we keep the center space? So obviously we know Vermont went so left, and fortunately enough, Vermonters saw this, and then they went right. And then if things go too right, fortunately enough, people are going to see it sooner versus later. So we're in this constant, but when people get so hung up on a party, obviously right now the Democrats have been out of control, statewide, nationally, et cetera. But when people get so hung up on a party that they won't ever leave it or consider something else, then I think it's hard for us to find the center. Right now, I would never. Anyway.
I'm sorry.
No,
what were you going to say?
No. There's another thought, but it's unrelated. So you go.
Well, I would say it's a hubristic response. Like what'll happen eventually. This is just my opinion. maybe the Republicans will take over it entirely. And what will happen eventually is they'll get ridiculous. And I mean, I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there. Like, I hope that's not what happens. Maybe maybe they'll do a great job and everything will be awesome. And
because right now I feel so fully aligned.
Yeah, I do too. But I'm like, but like at some point it'll go the other way. And you know, I can remember conversations I've had with certain people in that building who were like, yeah, we'd love to see that happen.
Right.
And like just the way they were talking about it, it was almost like, huh.
I know.
I don't really know
what will that do?
I don't really know. But somebody, Jerry Zeller writes, and Jerry, I just want to shout you out. Thank you so much for listening, even beyond our media. I mean, we still have like a handful, we have a good number of people watching us right now, even without cameras. Just want to shout all of you out.
Right.
Love you. You're amazing. Thanks for
you.
tuning in.
Woohoo.
But Jerry writes, get rid of hatred and things will balance out.
Yeah.
And I think that what I'm trying to get at too, when I asked that question about like, oh, if we just stopped, you know, geoengineering and stop, like everything, all the problems go away. It's like, yeah. Right. And it's like, there's more to that. It's like, if we just stopped being so faithless and just frivolous, and I know I'm saying stop being a human, but like stop being frivolous and faithless and just like waning and weak. And
I think there will always be the predator energy, the profit-driven, power-driven people. We're always going to see that. So there's always going to be a place for people to be engaged and make sure that that doesn't totally take over.
And that's where we come in
as the risk piece. That's where so many of us exactly. And the other thing that I was going to say on that, I forget. No, forget. I'll have to come back to
that.
It's
okay.
One.
No,
yeah,
it's fine.
Yeah.
But
this is what I was wondering. This is totally off the sort of cuff.
Sure.
There's such a part of me because of AI, and you know, we always get the text so much later than the text that's being used, from a government military standpoint, exactly. And so there's such a part of me that wonders, with Trump, were they using AI to pick up on, okay, we got to make sure, free speech and no censorship, and RFK, look at him, he's getting the numbers. So then they sort of rope it all in, not saying obviously he's so much better than Biden and all of that sort of stuff.
Way better,
how is that tech being used to drive the masses, to drive us, to drive our votes? I mean, I think a lot of people saw the reality, but I can't help but question that of, all of that stuff is being like, what's getting the most, what's the most popular?
I think 100%. And they not only, I don't know if you've ever, this is a really fun conversation. I want to get into this part of it because I don't know if you've ever read this before. I've told you a little bit about it, but like Donald Trump's uncle, John Trump, was responsible for going through Nikola Tesla's work.
Oh, interesting.
After Nikola Tesla passed away. So John Trump was the longest serving professor at MIT, longest person ever to work there for a period of time. And a lot of his responsibilities was following Nikola Tesla's death, was going through his files, paperwork, technology, information, all this crazy stuff. Like really weird. So we were talking a little bit about this before the show, and this was also on Rogan last night. And I have a friend down in Florida, who I think I mentioned earlier, who has been saying this to me for literally since 2017. I've known about this book that was written in 1883 called, and I'll just pull it up for people because it's so freaky. It's called the Marvelous Adventures of Baron Trump. And I want to read just a little bit of the description to you.
Interesting.
Because it very much ties into what you just said. If there were a looking glass technology, right? Where you could look into the future and steer outcomes based upon your technology. Here you go. This is, wait a minute. Hold on a second. I want to find a better short description of it because it just gives a quick synopsis.
Well, as you're
of the
also
story.
Thinking about the history, just thinking from everything I saw with Elon Musk, that his father was one of the primary advocates and sort of leaders of technocracy in Canada, is what I had seen. And I don't know if that's off, I'd have to double check, but I just think of technocracy and, going from constitutional republic democracy to a technocracy ruled by experts and elites.
Okay, so this also ties into what I'm trying to explain as well. So Wernher von Braun wrote a book about, back in the early 1960s, this is during the space race. Wernher von Braun, who was making rockets for NASA, wrote a book called, I think it was Project Mars, something like that. And it's about this guy, Elon, who goes and colonizes Mars, and he starts the first technocracy.
Right.
And Elon's father, by the way, was
interesting.
He was part of the Technocratic Party in
Canada.
and
That's
actually,
what I was thinking.
he actually
yes.
got kicked out of Canada. And his father has admitted, like, yeah, I really like this idea, this book, and
technocracy is all about social engineering, right?
Yes,
it's literally all about
it's all
efficiency, efficiency,
and experts and expert decision making, and like
right.
So I'm just trying to pull up the description of this book. The Baron Trump novels are 2 children's novels written in 18. I'm just going to show you all this so you can see it as well. By American author Ingersoll Lockwood. They remained obscure until 2017 when they received media attention. So that's what I learned about it was back then. This is so funny. Travels and Adventures of Little Baron Trump and His Wonderful Dog Bulger, and its sequel, Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey. The novel recounts adventures by the German boy Trump, who goes by Baron Trump, as he discovers weird underground civilizations, offends the natives, and flees from his entanglements with local women. But the point is, I just want to. There's a point here. So this is it right here. The Last President, in which New York City is. This is a book, and within the story, The Last President, in which New York City is riven by protests following the shocking victory in the 1896 presidential election of a populist candidate who brings on the downfall of the American Republic. This was written in the 1800s. Yeah.
I don't know enough about that.
And there's more to it too, and also there's like part of this is like there's like time travel engaged, and there's like stories with Nikola Tesla, and like this book was written in the 1800s.
Okay.
So it's very, very strange. And then the Elon Musk one, which I'll just Werner von Braun.
And then the Mars, you said.
Yeah.
Right.
Werner von Braun. Let's just see book. Let's see if I can find it real quick.
I think that's the thing too, just as you're looking, like I think as humans just have to be careful that we are
here it is, Project Mars.
Not being steered as much as we can, like that we have our sort of independent sovereignty and agency over the direction.
Oh no, I completely agree.
Right.
And we very much we want to know like what's going on, and I think there's like these ideas. Here it is right here. So. The book is called Project Mars, A Technical Tale. It takes place in 1980, 30 years in the future. The world is governed by the United States of Earth, establishing after a devastating war in the 1970s. This is just kind of about, the president orders a mission to Mars to establish how intelligent the Martians are and whether they pose a threat to Vermont or to the country or not. After establishing verbal communications, the humans learn about the Martian social structure and government, which is run by 10 males under the leadership of the Elon.
Oh my gosh,
The visitors witness technology.
Is it ELON?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. The visitors witness technology far superior to their own, including underground transport, organ transplants. They also learn views on but essentially, pleased with the developments on Mars, decide to establish formal diplomatic relations with it. Earth invites 3 Martians to accompany the explorers on their trip home after the humans. So basically the point is they go to Mars, discover that there's a technocracy there.
Right.
And this guy, the Elon, runs it. And Werner von Braun, who makes rockets just like Elon Musk.
It's classic.
It's just ridiculous.
Predictive programming.
Oh, it's predictive programming.
Yeah, from books to movies.
Exactly.
I know.
Exactly.
It's like planting thoughts, and then we have to know how to reject certain thoughts.
And that's the point. So to go back to what you were asking about, is Trump like getting rid of like the American Republic in some way or shape or form?
I'm not saying that.
I know you're not. I'm not either.
I'm not saying that by any means. I'm just saying that I think that they're all using the sort of AI systems to see what's popular, what should we be putting out there.
Yeah.
So
it's like a looking glass. It's like looking into the future and trying to steer outcomes based upon the data.
Right.
Right. And
but there's obviously so much work that has to be done to clean up the federal government.
Oh,
and
yes.
Like right now,
I agree.
Like seeing some steps, like I don't necessarily, like Howard Lutnick scares me and concerns me, but just seeing some of the steps taken, obviously it's
freaky.
I can't imagine if Biden was back in there.
Well, I don't think any of us can. And that's, to that point, I just want to make this clear. It's like, who was running our country for the last, and obviously Joe Biden wasn't. We've heard enough stories at this point. I mean, there's
Right.
countless stories of people
Right.
who like would go to him and try to talk to him about something that he signed,
Right.
and him not even having a clue what
Right,
they're
no
talking
record,
about.
right.
So it's like, okay, so the country was just run by special interests and bureaucrats for the last 4 years. Nobody has a clue who
And
was.
I think it's been the case for probably a good chunk of time.
Probably
ultimately,
for a
yeah,
long time.
Yeah.
But it was just ever the more obvious. And I think that's where they have really capitalized on this idea of the Trump, you know, who comes along and just he's his own guy. It's like,
Right.
well, I hope you're right.
I know.
And I'm
And
not.
that's where I feel like I'm so sort of Jeffersonian in the sense of I'm so much more like smaller state,
States.
local, like
Decentralization.
I mean, I pay attention to it because it obviously impacts us, but I put so much more of my energy into like more of the state thing of like, okay, what
Yeah.
needs to happen? What do we need to get rid of? What do we need to try to get in there? Who's doing what? You know,
And that's
because you're there, you know.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And I'm
Yeah.
a avid believer as well. You know,
Right.
decentralization of all things in government. And you know, I joke about Canada and Greenland, but ultimately, I'm not really sure that I'm supportive of these things because all
Right.
that is just increasing the size of the
I
American
know.
empire,
I know.
which the New World Order and the new structure of this global geopolitical situation that we see ourselves
Right.
in. It's like, no, we're just like giving up sovereignty of these people of Greenland
I know.
to us.
I
You know,
know.
and look, sure, everyone's all excited about all this, and it's like, oh, manifest destiny, we must do
I
that.
know.
It's like, look at the people.
And
that,
it's like the tech, the way that people
It's-
embrace the tech.
it's
and
so weird.
I know.
And I'm wondering, folks, is that really what you want to sign yourself on with?
I know.
Personally,
And that's those
no.
conscious questions. Like we have to be consciously asking these questions and seeing which direction do we want to go for sure. And next time that we have a talk, I think it would be important to talk about impact investing, social impact markets, and the UN and the World Economic Forum, and how that's playing out with like Bradley Tusk and his Hunger-Free Vermont, who he now has a legislator who is working for him. He was the one that was really responsible for the Hunger-Free Vermont campaign to get free school meals in the schools, but he's an impact investor, so I think that will be good for us to talk about because
Sure.
a lot of that going on right now where you have these private companies investing money to create an impact or change because they get a return on investment, but what sort of impact or change are they creating and is it helpful? So there's no more, philanthropy as we know. It's if I'm going to invest in this, I want a return on investment.
course.
So anyway, that'll be for another
that
another
definitely, we
time.
definitely should
But
talk
I
about
see it play out here.
No,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of instances in sitting here, but I definitely think it's time for us to wrap it up. We've gone for a great period of time here.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
really
yeah.
happy with our conversation.
I'm hungry.
And I'm hungry too.
And the only last thing I was going to say, if I could, is I just feel like obviously we're in the beginning of the session, but it's going to be so important just to see, and interesting to see, what they can make happen and if they can actually solve problems, or if it is going to be like Groundhog Day, if it is going to turn into.
Yeah, we're just workforce,
Right.
housing,
Right.
Act 250. Yeah, no,
Hopefully
I
we
know.
can get there.
So this is,
Yeah.
I just have a comment, and I'm going to read this, and this is where we're going to cap it off here.
Yep.
This is from Jerry Zeller. The only way we will know is a whistleblower. These people sign confidentiality contracts. There is so much we don't know.
I know.
Just imagine if AI changes what you believe and know is right,
Mm-hmm.
and then what does the next and then tells the next generation what AI thinks.
Right.
Go where they get their money. Dems equal taxpayers.
Right.
The Republican equals business and industry.
Right.
We as taxpayers need to demand a return on our investment. And I think that's a good place to stop right there. I think that, with this new presidency, that is the demand and mandate that you're seeing from the American people. Whether or not we 100% wholeheartedly agree with the direction of things that are going,
Right.
we do have an opportunity. We do have a responsibility as a nation to maintain our standing
Right.
in terms of technological developments. We don't want to be the last ones to have a seat at the table.
No.
We want to have a seat at the table. You know what they say? If you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu.
Right.
And I think that we do have some good people and some really smart people and beautiful minds that are
Yeah.
that are helping to make this happen. So Alison, just any closing statements? Anything
I
you'd like
would
to say?
just say that I feel like there are a lot of good legislators in there, and a lot of them really want the best, and they're trying hard. And I feel like a lot of the new ones and the Republican Party now are being a little bit more empowered to protect, Vermonters and work on affordability and some of the public safety issues. And I feel like I see that happening, and I'm hopeful. We'll see. I'm hopeful that we'll get there. And thank you so much for having me, as usual.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming in.
Awesome to talk.
I just want to quickly sign out. Thank thank you again, everyone out there for who listening, and if you've stuck it out even without video, you're really awesome. You're a superstar. And hopefully you don't need video just to listen. But point is, thank you so much. If you're not currently a subscriber to the Vermont Daily Chronicle, you can support free speech in your state right here for just 30 cents a day. Yes, I will admit we're a little bit more conservative leaning. We're very upfront about that. We're all about transparency.
Free speech forever.
Free speech forever. You can see on our website who our sponsors are, and you can infer based upon that. But ultimately, yeah, we try to work with people we're aligned with. So that way we're able to do the work that we see to be very important. So if you're somebody out there, you want to support free speech in Vermont, or you know what, even if you don't want to be a subscriber, you have something you want to write, you have an idea you want to get out there, you can do that. And you can write it in at news@Vermont Daily Chronicle. That's our website. Our email if you want to participate. We're all about promoting voices in this state. It doesn't matter the political spectrum. It doesn't matter where you fall on the political spectrum. We just want to be that source. So thank you so much for tuning in. Again, feel free to subscribe, hit that like button, hit that share button, write in a comment, send it in an email to your grandma. Hey, Grandma, I love this conversation. That was a really good conversation that they had. Maybe you should listen to it. I know you're worried about healthcare, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm going to sign off. This has been an excellent conversation from the 802 Scoop Studio here in downtown Barrie. Signing off, Creemee Cast, VDC TV. Thank you so much, everyone.